Good morning, everyone. Amy? You're over there. Okay. Ready? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency meeting of January 18th, 2023 in this lovely civilized environment. Thanks to Sunstream and Diamond Head, David Lawrence, Neil Hopgood, and anybody else, Marcel, anybody else who made this happen. God bless you. Thank you so much, because this is quite a nice environment to be in today. We don't have jackhammers or generators or anything else, so thank you to everyone. If you would please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You mind standing?
Go ahead, Jane.
Oh, what happened?
Just a short word of thanks to everyone here in attendance for taking your time, for this community, for continuing to support the town's efforts to rebuild and restructure. And let's keep an open mind and open hearts during this meeting. Amen. That's okay. What I'd like to do just for everyone in attendance and the transcriber, Scott, would you start just saying good morning?
Good morning, I'm Scott Safford.
Okay.
Good morning, I'm Scott Safford.
Good morning, Jim Bowen.
Morning, Jane Plummer and Don Sudduth.
We have Don Sudduth on the phone. I'm Anita Saracita.
Good morning, Doug Ekman.
Good morning, Patrick Vanass.
Okay, very good. We also have present John Herron, Town Attorney, Amy Baker, Clerk, and staff members. So we'll move on to the first. Everybody can hear. Members, if you'll remember to turn off. And first item on the agenda is public comment, approval of minutes for December 21st. May I have a motion to accept and approve the minutes as they were distributed or with any changes?
I'll motion to approve the minutes as, I'll motion to approve the minutes as.
In the motion. I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no objection, the motion carries unanimously. The next item is public comment. We'll take any public comment that there is this morning, but do remember that if you're here to speak about a particular case, you're best speaking during that case, unless of course you just don't have time to stay for it. So Amy, do you have cards, or should I just call person by person? Who'd like to be the first person to speak? If you just raise your hand or come up. Doug, come on. You've got 3 minutes. It's a long agenda today, so please, if you would just stick to the time, I'd really appreciate it. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning. Doug Young, 750 Matanzas Court previously. See how things go in the future.
I wish you well.
Thank you. So I had a handout, and this is a comment relative to side setbacks. And I mentioned something about this 2 meetings ago, and I just wanted to reiterate my thoughts on this. That is, if you look at these charts, what we have for side setbacks is a sawtooth. The first chart shows just the 7.5 foot up to 75 feet, and then 10 feet over 75 feet. And so all of a sudden, if I get a 74.5 foot lot, now I go to 75 feet, I lose 4.5 feet of building width. This, to me, that's just not very elegant. If you look at the third page, for corner lots, it's even worse, right? At 50 feet, a little less than 50 feet, a little more than 50 feet, you lose 5 feet. 60 feet, you lose 5 feet. 75 feet, you lose 7.5 feet if you combine the two rules. And I've included in the package possible set of language and rules that could alleviate that and make a smooth curve so that you don't have the incentive to cut a half foot off your lot by giving it away to the neighbor or giving it away to the town in order to get a bigger building built. So that's in a nutshell, and certainly don't expect everybody to digest all that in less than 3 minutes, but hopefully you can take that home and look at. Second thing was a proposal for mechanical equipment to extend 4 feet into the required side yard setback if it's elevated. Why are we even considering that? We've had prohibition on mechanical equipment in the side setbacks for a number of years. The contractors, and especially building new homes, they understand, oh, you make a little alcove inside, you lose maybe 1% of the floor area for, you know, an air conditioner or whatever. And why would you relax that? At the very least, this says nothing about, hey, what about, it's, you know, you can have air conditioners too. You can have pool equipment. You can have generators. And so that says you could have to 4 of these little balconies on the side of your house up 10 feet or 20 feet or wherever. And so nothing is doing none of these changes are doing anything to address density for places like Palermo Circle, where we've got incredible density. Now we're going to have air conditioners and so forth stuck into the side. All right, I'll come to the next one. Yes, I did to yeah, to all 3. Thank you. Yep.
Next, Amy's going to keep the time. Next person who'd like to speak, and then you'll be next. Come on up. If you would, when you come to the microphone, please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Caney.
Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, everyone. West Woodland Custom Homes. I think I'm pretty well known.
Carolyn, pull that mic down to you. There you go.
Oh, is that better?
Much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
As a builder, and I've dealt with these setbacks over the last year. I am in agreement with the new proposal of relaxing the setbacks 7.5 feet up to lots that are 75 foot wide. Although I think you should include a 75-foot lot as well. Anything over 75 could be the 10-foot setback. So I would be very, very happy to see that come back again, because the 15% has been very, very restrictive on a lot of our clients. And many of them have had to redesign their plans, not only once, but twice, but 3 times. So it, you know, it really was a very difficult time for everybody involved there. So I agree with your new setback proposals. In terms of corner lots, I've dealt with corner lots a lot. And I think if you have a corner lot, you should have a 25-foot setback and a 15-foot setback, regardless of the size of the lot. That's how it was before, and it worked very well. And I think a lot of these corner lots are very, very small and very restrictive. So I think relaxing one of the setbacks from 25 feet to 15 feet would be acceptable to a lot of people. AC setbacks. We have worked with the no encroachment on the side, and we have recessed many AC units into the house, which seems to work pretty well. I have mixed feelings about it. Sure, I'd like to be able to stick them in the side and be done with it. But on the other hand, I do accept the fact that a lot of neighbors are going to be disturbed by noise. And so I know that's the main reason for this. So if you're going to relax the AC setbacks, I would say it would apply to lots 75 feet or larger. That would be my opinion on it. It's often very difficult to, although AC unit or AC platforms are allowed to encroach up to 3 feet on the rear setback. But in many cases, this doesn't really help, because generally the master bedrooms are on the rear, the porches are on the rear. So you end up having to recess into the building. So, 75 feet or larger, and allowing it to extend would be good. So that's pretty much all I have to say. And I would like to see the new setbacks.
Thank you, Carolyn, very
approved.
much. Appreciate your comments. Ma'am? Amy, was that sound the time? Or was that somebody's phone? So you know what, Amy, I'm going to do it here because the sound will come off of my phone and they'll pay attention to it. Okay, so if you hear a ding or you hear some ringing, that means out. No,
Okay.
okay.
I don't have 3 minutes, but
All
well, I
right, go
could
ahead.
spend 3 minutes. Sue Patton from Bay Beach Lane.
Good morning, Sue.
Good morning. I tried to read through all 404 pages of the agenda.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was. So if I get my facts wrong, let me know, but I think you'll get the gist. So on page 388, you talk about civic and open space, which Bay Beach Lane has 55 acres of open space. We want to keep it that way. We don't want any buildings at all. We want to actually develop it as a bird preserve. The hurricane did a little damage, but we're hoping the birds will come back. And I noticed that the area that you said open space, you crossed off that you can't build. And it looks like now the town can put in fire, police, schools on open space. So I'm a little concerned, maybe I didn't read it correctly, but I'm a little concerned that open space, that the town could take it and then build a school or something. But there's very limited, I don't know of any other place on Fort Myers Beach that has 55 acres, and we want to keep it a bird preserve.
Thank you, Sue,
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, who'd like to speak next? Anybody? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good morning, everybody. DeWitt Willis, 99 Andre Marr,
Good morning.
corner of Estero. Once again, a corner of Watts, so that's good. Here's my question, I guess, as I begin the rebuild process and have to start investing in plans and everything else, I would like a starting point as to who can I speak to sit there and figure out what exactly I can now do with this lot, because I'm sitting here in a quandary and I don't want to start just throwing money at stuff with no return. That is my question to you. Fair enough?
I'm going to have somebody talk to you after this because we can't engage in questions and answers. So
Okay.
your town manager is right here in this lovely light blue shirt. And so maybe you can speak to him afterwards. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Who's the next person to speak? Yes, sir. Come on up. And after this gentleman, who's next? Look, everybody wants to come into civilization. You're next, okay? Good morning.
Thank you.
What street is this? Sterile.
These are those cottage lots.
Uh-huh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sim Mayer, 716 Estero Boulevard, which is, I had a house there, now I have a lot. It's just this side of the Best Western. The house is now gone. All I have is an empty lot. It was a fantastic house. It had upstairs unit, a lower unit, and a garage. Our adult kids, grandkids stay with us. They use the upstairs, we use the downstairs. It was great. As you can see on the papers I passed out, it was a middle house in a group of 9. It sat on the lot in the neighborhood perfectly. There's a stand drive on one side, parking on the Estero side. If you look closely at the neighborhood picture, you can see it has plenty of room on 3 sides of it. It was a picturesque little neighborhood. Now, I am told under current zoning that we may or may not be able to get a variance to rebuild. If you look at the survey I passed out, my lot is approximately 50 by 69.5 on one side and 50 by 60 on the other side. It has a setback of about 5 feet and 7.5 feet. The house was about 1,500 square feet plus a garage. It's set on the lot perfect, as you can see in the survey. I have a lot size and setbacks circled in yellow. I don't know what more you could ask for. It's in there perfect. I don't know how the current zoning reads exactly, but I'm told it's trouble for me and many other people. I'm here to ask you, please make the zoning codes friendly to me and the people who have lots such as mine, so that we do not need a variance at all, or if we need a variance, it's easy to obtain. The hurricane changed many things on the island. Now we need to adjust. So I'm asking you to please adjust the codes to accommodate the residents with smaller lots. If you consider the price of the lots and the cost of rebuild, it isn't feasible to build a small house. So what I'm asking, please give us some good rebuilding options so we can rebuild without variances. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much. Yes, who is the next one? Yes, sir, come on. And who's going to follow? So when this gentleman stops, you stand up, okay? Okay, so I'm just told if you're not speaking into the microphone, adjust it so that you are. There you go.
Okay,
All
for
right.
the record, I'm Dan Dodrell. I'm a contractor.
Dan Dodrell.
Yes, Anita
I
Saracena.
went to high school with him.
You did it.
When did we
indeed.
get so old?
I don't know.
Good
About
morning,
40 years
Dan.
ago. Good
It's
morning.
nice to see you.
Good to see you as always. And I'm addressing the current ordinance has a footnote on Matanzas Street and Matanzas Court that says residential lots have to have a 10-foot setback.
Yeah.
And currently I have a permit application in for a very nice house at 745 Matanzas. It had a house before the storm. It doesn't have a house. They want to rebuild. We designed a super skinny house. The lot where the garage is only, basically the middle of the lot's only about 40 feet wide. We got it to work with 7.5, including to the mechanicals, indented them, all that kind of stuff. They're telling us it's got to be 10 foot only on Matanzas. I did not read the 380-page proposal. Maybe you're addressing that. If not, we need to address Matanzas so it fits in with the rest of the beach to, 7.5 up to 75 feet, 10 foot over 75 feet. And we can make a bunch of people on Matanzas Court and Street really happy.
Okay.
Including their contractor. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Nice to see you. Next speaker. And as soon as he's finished, you pop up, all right?
Good morning, esteemed council members. My name is Ken Pariser. I own 724 Estero Boulevard. I've been vacationing and owned the property for about 20 years. I went going to other areas like Siesta Keys, and I found my home down on Fort Myers Beach. It was comprised of the cute cottages, and things have changed dramatically, either by choice with the advent of Margaritaville or whether it be Mother Nature changing things. I ended up purchasing the rental cottage that I had been living in for a number of years, did substantial improvements on it in the form of siding, hurricane windows, doors, granite on the inside, new flooring, things of that nature. Recently had it on the market for a substantial amount of money, and now it's approximately a 40 by 50 lot. My neighbors are similarly minded. They are owner users, and we got rid of a lot of undesirable properties. The properties where I'm at, although I'm a little bit prejudiced, are the upper scale, nicer units. So I beseech this council to be understanding and flexible and realize those of us that have a concerted, committed interest in the well-being of this community want to rebuild. We don't want to have strictly commercial properties. I think it would take away from the benefit of this community by having these monstrosities that are being built, either the huge individual privately owned residents or the commercial properties. I'm making every effort possible to rebuild, and fighting with insurance companies, fighting with surveyors, doing all of the aftermath after Ian is a nightmare enough, let alone having the local government suggest I can't rebuild when I'm so desirous of yet again contributing to the well-being of this community. Thank you.
I'm sure you meant to say with all due respect to monstrosities. Okay, next, please. Who'd like to speak after this gentleman? Okay, you're next after him.
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Randy Crow, and I'm a resident at 730 Matanzas Court. And in an effort of time and courtesy for this long agenda, I've also been asked to echo the Cook family at 630 Matanzas Court. We as well was left with a swimming pool and a seawall. Lost the house, detached garage, boathouse, 8 pilings in all flew it upside down into my neighbor's yard. So I'm here on behalf of the Matanzas Court residents, asking this board to please leave the setbacks alone. Let us put our homes back on our property the way it was, and everyone else on this beach. Because if you really want us to build back and invest in this community, please don't add any more handcuffs to this already terrible situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir. Good morning. Oh,
Good morning. For the record, James Inc. I'm here on behalf of 430 Estero, which is one of our family holdings. We are a unique area in the 400 block where we have lots that are non-conforming. They are smaller. They're even smaller than maybe where the board is considering looking with some of the changes that I read in today's agenda. Unfortunately, I can't be here for when you get that far down the agenda to discuss this, but I wanted to put 2 things on the record. Our 400 block has lots that are 45 feet deep. Under the current RC zoning, it would be a 25-foot street back and a 20-foot rear setback, which totals 45 feet. What I would propose and a way to handle the historic part of the build back is if a homeowner came in with documentation, be it a survey, be it just documentation that says, here's my footprint of what I had, and I had a single-story cottage, and that's all I desired to do, just that box above the current flood, that there in the build back be some sort of provision where they could do that by right instead of having to come in. The 7.5-foot side setbacks on the 50-foot lots, of which there's 3 in that block, are problematic. And we are looking at potentially being on your doorstep soon with 12 variances. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Inc. Next speaker, please. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Dave Lay with 1920 Bayview Drive, which is right across the street, right behind what used to be Hoosiers. My issues again involving side setbacks. My house was substantially damaged during the end, and I intend to elevate our home. So the current lot arrangement is 66 by 100, but it's trapezoidal shape, so it's got kind of an odd situation to it. In order to meet FEMA guidelines, I need to move all mechanical and electrical from the ground level to above BFE. This is a recommendation by FEMA, so we're trying to do this. I also need to add stairs and landings to access the first level, which will now be 12 foot above grade. All this will require more square footage in the upper level. The most logical place to put this in my existing property would be to expand the west side of my house or my structure. I'm requesting the town change the side setback to equal to 7.5 feet, which is what it was before, for lots equal to and less than 75 foot wide. So this would be on your table 34-3. Want to have that basically go back to the way it was before. This would be in line with proposed corner setback changes that you already have on your agenda today. I would just like to make sure that's included not just for corner lots, but for all lots. Okay. And this also would be in line with existing properties in my neighborhood, which already have what appear to be 15 feet between the properties, between the structures. So we're no different than everybody else in the neighborhood. By doing this, you're going to provide an incentive to allow people to raise their houses if they want to, because they'll have a place to put all these structures above ground. As a second issue, and looking at the properties, and I don't know what the fire code is with regard to the monstrosities where we talked about earlier.
With all due
Third-story
respect.
building, with all due respect. But will the town allow for stairs and landings extending into the setback for secondary egress? This seems to me to be prudent as a fire safety issue, especially for large 3-story homes, which could have 15 people partying in the upper level, and which could be trapped if there's only a single egress out of that property. I don't want Fort Myers Beach to be on the news because of a party that happened and everybody was trapped. But if you look at these houses, I'd say maybe only a third of egress, secondary egress out of that upper level. Some of the other issues regard to the current zoning in my house over here is AE 11. It was AE 13, which is the date I submitted my plans on November 16th, the day before the changes. That was AE 13. The current is AE 11. Is that still BFE, the same data point, or is that changed? I know you can't answer. But
And your time is up. I'm sorry to say.
You need to address that as well.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
The next speaker, please. No one else wishes to speak? Really? All of you here? Just for the air cool and the nice quiet situation? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments. The public comment section is closed, and we'll move on to the first of several public hearings. The first on our list is Carousel RPD, use table and maximum height for a rooftop deck, 20220100. It's at 6249 Estero Boulevard. John? And good morning. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Ex parte communications?
Yes, and also the items 6A, B, C, D, and E are all quasi judicial
Yes.
in nature. So therefore, it would be appropriate to, at this point, have anyone who's going to testify with regard to these matters to stand and raise their right hand and be sworn in.
Okay, so yes, that includes all of you. So for each and every, this isn't, John, you want to do a whole swear in for everybody all at
Yeah,
once? Perfect.
I suspect it would be easier.
Fantastic. That would be great.
So if you're here for the Carousel RPD, the Pink Shell CBD, the variance at 8180 Lagoon, the variance at 237 Old San Carlos, and the variance for 3780 Estero Boulevard, again, please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Witness has been sworn in, and at this time, before we take up the first item, which is what the chair already announced, it would be appropriate for any LPA members to disclose any ex parte communications they've had with regard to this matter.
I'm going to start with you, Patrick.
Yes, I will be recusing myself. Okay, I will be recusing myself from voting on this item. My business partner, Ken Galander, is representing the applicant. So I will refrain from discussion and voting.
You're going to recuse yourself from discussion and voting.
Correct.
Okay.
It's not necessary.
Well, but
Yes,
it's,
it is.
okay. That's it.
So
Doug, any comment or
Oh.
any,
No, I have not had any communication.
okay. Jane?
No ex parte.
Jim?
No ex parte.
Scott?
no ex parte.
I have had none as well. All right, so let's begin with the applicant's presentation. Oh, Don, I'm sorry, I forgot you're in the little box. Okay, Don Suddeth has also not had any ex parte. Thank you, Don.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I know this is sort of, we're in a new element here. I have a presentation. I don't know if that has been distributed at all to the.
It is not.
Okay. So I have paper copies, old school.
Thank you.
We like that.
As you can see, Jane likes the paper copies.
I know, I'm sorry. I apologize. I have to touch it here and write on it.
Good morning. Again, my name is Ken, for the record, Ken Galander with the Neighborhood Company, here on behalf of the property owner, applicant, and developer of the property, Carousel Beach Redevelopment LLC. Just real quick, first, page 2 of your slide is our request, is an amendment to the plan development on behalf of Carousel Beach Redevelopment to allow for an accessory use of decking on the rooftop to support a living and amenity area for unit owners and their guests. Slide 3, the subject property consists of 2 parcels, approximately 4.2 acres at 6230 and 6240 Estero Boulevard. It is through ordinance number 18-11, it was approved for a residential plan development. And a portion of that property is also an current environmentally critical zoning area of 2.5 acres. It was approved for a multifamily, a 2-phase, 12-unit multifamily residential development. And currently the phase 1 is currently under construction. The next slide just shows you an aerial representation of the property and the 2 parcels adjacent to Estero Boulevard. So under ordinance 1811, there's a schedule of uses that are applied, and there are a variety of amenity and accessory uses that are listed. And over time, the current developer realized through their design and aspects of the development that they had a flat roof with parapet, and that was an opportunity for a functional element opportunity to look into how can we utilize that space for our guests and the owners and their guests. And schedule of uses, again, does not speak to that. There are other accessory uses that are listed.
Could I stop you for just one second, Ken? Could we close that door? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ken. I
guess I broke the mic.
that's all right. You were getting swallowed up by.
Hear me now still?
Hear you fine.
Work? Okay. So back to the accessory uses that are listed, and none reflected the rooftop. So coordinating with staff, we felt it was appropriate to work through the amendment process to offer up this opportunity and look into this. So adding the rooftop deck as a permitted residential accessory uses is what we're proposing here. What we also found is through the plan development, the schedule of uses identifies what is appropriate. And our understanding, if it was a conventional zoning district, you could be working through and provide for these accessory uses. So we're just trying to be consistent with that opportunity as well as a by right under conventional zoning. Slide 6 simply shows where the rooftop deck is a listed use under the residential accessory component of the schedule of uses for the plan development. Slide 7, this is a actual intent of the rooftop deck amenity area that the developer is working towards. It will have decorative decking, sitting and lounging areas, landscaping, planters. They're proposing to have patio umbrellas or some sort of shade canopies and or perhaps a pergola structures, fire pits, patio deck accessories, and of course some ambient lighting for the guests and the owners. Looking at the key factors, next slide, there's no increase in density associated with this accessory use, no increase in the height associated with the overall building envelope. We are consistent with the deviation 1 that was applied to the development. for the building height. No changes to the master concept plan, as in this amenity areas on the rooftop, and the site development regulations, no changes to setbacks, any of those components either. Slide 9 shows the elevation of the building that is under construction currently. And at the top, you can see the roof floor labeled, and that is the parapet wall, and that's where the amenity area will be confined within those wall structures. Now, just to clarify, maybe a canopy and or one of those pergolas we're seeking that could be potentially 10 feet above the roof deck. So that parapet wall is approximately 4 feet, meeting certain code requirements for safety. So that unhabitable structure that may be proposed would maybe extend about 6 feet above the parapet top. Slide 10 just gives you a representation of the renderings of the buildings that are under construction. The smaller one on the slide on the top left is the one, phase 1 under construction. And the larger building is phase 2. Slide 11, we're committing to no commercial grade amplified sound associated with this area, no outdoor kitchens, grills, food prep, no water features, no pools or whirlpools, and no bathrooms are proposed at the top. So, slide 12, in conclusion, our request to add the rooftop deck as an accessory use has been found, our opinion is consistent with the comprehensive plan, especially policy 4B4, the land development code, and the other elements of ordinance 18-11. It's also opinion that will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise. We are agreeable to the conditions that staff has laid out in their staff report. Again, if used, explaining the shade structures, they may extend approximately about 6 feet above the top of the parapet wall. With that, any questions for me?
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Jane, any questions?
I have none at this time, but I like the proposal.
Jim, do you have any questions?
Are you willing to add these commitments to the approval? That the 5 conditions would be part of the approval?
Is in the no commercial
Sure.
grade? Yes. Yes.
Anything else, Jim?
No.
Scott, questions?
No, but I really like this proposal.
Okay. Doug, any questions?
I like the proposal. It looks nice. But I assume it goes without saying that in turtle season and so forth, all these lights would be adjusted to comply with federal law and state law.
Yes, sir. And I believe that is a condition that is listed in the
Is that a
staff report to
condition?
be consistent with land development code and specifically turtle lighting. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? What is commercial grade amplified sound? So when you say no commercial grade amplified sound, are we going to have boom boxes up there? I mean,
Well-
what exactly does that mean?
So what we're recognizing is if you had integrated speaker systems, bringing in similar to potentially a commercial entity that's going to be providing for sound amplifications for parties of that nature. So this is just it's intended to be a quiet ambiance for the guests and owners to appreciate the views that this property would generate.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I don't anticipate boom boxes, but maybe your little portable speakers and that such.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. We'll go on to the staff report.
The gentleman on the
Oh,
other,
Don, thank you for reminding me.
sure.
I
Just
need
want to
him
make sure
be, like,
everybody.
right here. Don, do you have any questions on this case? Yeah, I'm just. Okay.
Property owners are not.
Okay. So his 2 questions have been answered. Okay.
Right.
Sweet baby Jesus. You know,
On that
not
note,
a day can go by.
I'll sit down.
Huh. Really? Really? Wait, but now it stopped. But wait, it stopped. It stopped.
Wait, it stopped.
Come back. Please come back.
You think because it stopped, it's over?
I would think they'd come and say, hey, you've got to get out. Well, welcome to our new reality. Yeah, so have I. Okay. All right, well, we'll let other people come back in when they need to. In the meantime, Jason, would you like to proceed with staff presentation if you feel safe enough to do so?
If it gets warm, I'm out of here. Okay.
Okay, me
All
too.
right. Jason Green, Community Development. I won't rehash some of the presentation. It is a requested amendment to the residential plan development, as was already discussed for the Carousel Beach redevelopment and their owners. To reference that residential part, I think when we're talking about the deck and noise and issues,
Yep.
it is a 4-unit condominium. It is residential, so it doesn't generally carry the concerns of the parties or bands and that sort of thing that are with the commercial developments, so to speak. The criteria outlined are under section 34-85 and section 30. So we'll return to our seats now, I guess, and trays are upright position. Section 34-85 and 34-216 of the Land Development Code. Those are the two sections that have the criteria for plan developments. Again, this is an amendment to the height to accommodate a rooftop deck, as the applicant mentioned. No change to the structure itself, the height of the structure. Staff has, based on those findings of the criteria, it is, again, a change of an addition of the accessory use and the amendment to the deviation of the height. Just to point that out, is the original RPD had a deviation to the height. So this is an amendment to that deviation to allow the rooftop deck. And so staff has recommended approval based on the criteria found in section 34-85 and 34-216, and with the following conditions that we are for your discussion. You're also able to add or amend any of those conditions per your, depending on your recommendation. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Jason. Doug, do you have any questions for the staff report? Any questions for Jason?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Dawn, do you have any questions for Jason?
No questions.
Jane?
Well, my only question is, it's not stated with this 10-foot extra height, that it should there be anything that requires it to not be an enclosed space?
There's not 10 extra feet of height.
No, I'm just saying there is.
So the intent is for the deck. They also had, to your point, I think that part of the request is to an allowance for some type of pergola or other structure. I think it would be appropriate if you wanted to further that condition and say unenclosed, not a solid roof, and or.
It could be a solid roof, but as far, I'm just saying, I think that we should make some kind of statement that it should not be an enclosed building.
And we may want to, and maybe the applicant can chime in a little bit, but on the maybe a percentage of the footprint of the roof or something of that nature to limit the amount that is above that additional, the 4 feet wall that's around the outer edge. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, Ken Glan again for the record. Our intent is this is non-habitable space. It is not enclosed. Intent to have no roof structures to these. The pergola may have slats to it as a typical design element, and or these canopies or shade components. Those can be removed during any event that would possibly be coming. So intent is not to have an enclosed story in that sense. So it's not all non-habitable space, but we are seeking that this extension of these structural or elements of the pergolas and these canopies to maybe go above that parapet wall.
So you wouldn't have a problem with that being a part of the condition that
That's,
not have.
we are agreeable.
Okay.
Jim, any questions for staff?
No staff questions.
Scott, any questions?
Nor I.
Okay. No further questions for staff. I'm going to open up the public portion of the hearing. If there's anybody who'd like to speak on this application, please come forward. Seeing no one, the public hearing portion is closed. Is there a, Jason, do you know offhand what page in the packet, because for some reason, I'm having a difficult time, that you have the motion laid out in the package? Or you know what, I'll just ask.
So on the cover page, there was kind of a motion there, but you also want to incorporate the findings and conclusions of the staff report that start on page 10 of the packet.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion when I find it.
Okay.
Okay. I motion to approve the accessory use of the decking on the rooftop for outdoor living amenity, and approve the 10-foot additional canopy space with the condition that are in the packet, plus one more condition that there won't be enclosed structures on top of the roof, and that I feel that it meets the what's the word I want? It's compatible with the request, and I do want to.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Jim. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing any discussion on the motion?
Yeah.
I have a minor point. I think Ken said the parapet wall is 4 feet and they might have canopies or something going additional 6 feet. So maybe amend it to 6 feet above the top of the parapet wall for canopies or shade structures or pergola.
If I may, again.
You may not.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry, Ken. Jason, you have any comment on that?
So the requested change to the deviation of the height is for the 10 feet because of where we measure height to, which is the roof structure in this case. So the parapet wall essentially doesn't count. So it's from the top of the roof behind that parapet wall to the 10 feet. So you're already limited by the deviation, setting it to 10 feet additional. I believe it's
Understood.
45 feet to 5410 essentially is what the change is.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion, which is to approve with an added condition of non-enclosures? No other conversation? Jane, your motion, your vote?
In favor, yay.
Jim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Doug?
In favor.
And I vote in favor as well. It passes unanimously.
Don?
Oh, Don?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your presentation and congratulations to the carousel. It's a nice presentation. Before I go on, John, we have Don Suddeth on the phone and he's participating that way. Does he have the ability to vote on the agenda issues? Fantastic. Did you hear that, Don?
I did, thank you.
Great. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Pink Shell CPD.
Anita,
Yes.
if I may, real quick. I didn't want to talk and influence anything related to the previous discussion. I think when it comes to enclosures, and if the LPA wants to just address this, there's a need for an elevator shaft and mechanicals. And typically, as you come out of the elevator, there's a little small lobby associated with that. So I think, would that be considered a structure or not? I think it depends on staff. And I think typically it makes sense to allow some leeway for that. So I don't know if you guys want to take that up, but I think that's what Mr. Galander wanted to bring up.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what you were referring to, was it, Jane?
No,
She
I'm
was
talking about accessory
yeah.
structures.
Okay. All right, the next item is the Pink Shell CPD Amendment DCI 20220032, and it's to allow liveaboard vessel use at the Pink Shell. Good morning, Mr. Washulis. How are you?
Good morning, council members. For the record, my name is Bill Wychulis, Senior Vice President of Operations for the Pink Shell Resort and Marina. We come to you today for a small request. The Pink Shell was built in 1950. The docks were put at that time. About 8 years ago, we put in new docks, reconfigured them. We have a submerged land lease with DEP. They allow us to have liveaboards, and we have a conflict that there's a condition of no liveaboards. But when you read the code for the town of Fort Myers Beach, there's no definition of liveaboards. So we're kind of unique as we own our main use is the resort, and we have an accessory use as the marina, owning property on both sides. We just are coming today to ask to make those that condition the same as with DEP, where we are allowed liveaboards. DEP's definition of liveaboards is someone staying over 5 nights. We get many boaters that are staying with at our resort for more than the 5 nights. So we just want to be in compliance. Simple presentation. I am open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Bill. Any questions for Mr. Washulis?
I do.
Jane?
With a liveaboard facility, typically there is requirements for bathrooms, laundry, and parking and trash removal. How is that handled in this situation without adding to your property uses?
We comply with all of those items. We have marina showers. Well, we did. We are rebuilding them. We do trash. The requirement of the town is every week. We do it actually every day. We have pump out on all the slips at the marina, which are all requirements that DEP has that we had to comply with that we had before. I believe the condition of the liveaboards was the fact that our main use is not a marina. Our main use is a resort with an accessory use of a marina. And that's why I think the condition was originally put on for the Pink Shell.
As I recall, on the right-hand side, on the bay side of the property, they only had a teeny little building there for being able to give out things to go out into the back bay, like fins or what, I don't know.
Yeah, on the marina side of the property, there's the buildings, our harbor master building, where we handle all the check-in and check-out for the guests that are coming on to the slips. On the other side of the property, we had marina showers.
So on the Gulf side of the property, you have the showers
Correct. Yes.
and laundry facilities for these people.
Correct. Yes.
Any other questions, Jane?
Nope.
I've got a quick
Patrick?
question. Typically, the folks using those slips are guests at the resort?
Well, they're it's almost like a floating hotel, the best way to look at it. It's 41 slips that they're able to use all the facilities of the resort. They're not staying in a guest unit. Most of them are staying on the boat. Typically, we can handle up to 120-foot yacht. So, I mean, we could have anywhere from, most of our average boats are in the 60-foot range. So usually a $2 to $3 million yacht.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much, Bill. We'll call you back up if we need you.
Wait, I do have one more.
Go ahead, Jane.
And there is no annual rentals there.
No, as to somebody staying there for a year, no. Well, with the DEP's definition of liveaboards, they don't allow anybody over 6 months. So we wouldn't be able to take somebody over 6 months on
Could
the
they
boat.
check out one day and come back the next?
You mean after 6 months or?
No, I mean, at the end of the 6 months, take their boat around the block and come back?
Not necessarily. It's not the business that we are typically looking for at our marina. It's mainly people that are coming for over 5 nights, 7 nights. Some come for 30 days, some come for 60 days, but we typically don't take over 6 months. I mean, it's just not that, at our prices, nobody would want to stay that long, unfortunately. To be honest.
Congratulations. Okay, Scott, any questions for the applicant?
I think Jane was kind of hinting about something. Were you looking for a place?
Yeah, she is. Okay.
No,
I could not afford that.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Bill. Sarah.
Good morning. Sarah Probst with Community Development. Bill Wachulis with JBO LLC has applied to amend the Pink Shell CPD to allow liveaboard vessels in association with the submerged land lease from DEP. The Pink Shell CPD currently includes a dock for the use of resort occupants or for lease to non-occupants. The approved DEP submerged land lease previously did not allow liveaboard vessels, but has been updated to allow liveaboard vessels. Required pump-out facilities and restrooms are provided at the docking facility. The DEP permit defines liveaboard vessels as a vessel docked at the facility and inhabited by a person or persons for any 5 consecutive days or a total of 10 days in a 30-day period. Liveaboard status may not exceed 6 months in any 12-month period, nor shall any vessel constitute a legal or primary residence. The proposed liveaboard vessel is to cause negative impacts to adjacent properties. However, a condition has been included to disallow liveaboard vessels in the 4 slips to the southwest closest to the adjacent homes as long as 309 Estero is under separate ownership from Pink Shell. As noted in the staff report, the existing CPDs, previous PUDs, and associated MCPs dating back to 1982 are complicated. Staff is recommending a condition that the applicant clean up the existing CPDs to clarify which properties are included, number of allowed units, and allowed uses. This will ensure going forward the ordinances are understandable and correct. Staff is recommending that the LPA recommend approval of the request to include liveaboard vessels with conditions. I'm available to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here.
Thank you. Before I go any further, I'm remiss to ask for ex parte communication. Scott, did you have any conversations on this?
I did not.
Jim?
I did not.
Jane?
No, I did not.
Doug?
I did not.
Patrick?
Nope. Did not.
Okay, and
Don Suddeth?
neither Don Suddeth, and neither did I. Okay, questions for staff. Patrick, any questions?
I'm going to have some comments, but no questions at this time.
Okay, Doug, any questions for staff?
No questions.
Jane?
Nothing.
Jim, any questions for staff?
No question.
And Scott, how about you?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Sarah, let me just see what page this is. Hold on one second. This is page one. Yes, sir.
He said no.
Yeah. But thank you. Jane is in charge of Dawn from here on out. So if he doesn't get recognized, it's the vice chair's problem. Did you hear that, Dawn?
I take responsibility.
Okay. Anyhow, on page 127 of 404 of the packet, it's just the state land lease inspection. And this has an expiration date of the 27th of June last year. I'm guessing that this all sort of runs concurrently with whatever the land lease is from the state for that area. Is that right?
And I do believe that they provided me the updated
The
document.
updated one.
Yes.
I would suspect they would have. Okay. Bill, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I just was going to state that we haven't updated one till
It wasn't with the original application
Yeah,
because
it's
it was
probably
submitted
inconsequential.
a
It just
long
caught
time
my
ago.
eye. And so,
June 27th, 2027. We're
great.
good for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, I don't have any other questions. I'll open this now for the public hearing. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak on the Pink Shells case? Seeing no one, the public portion of the hearing is closed. Patrick, you said you had comments.
Yes. First of all, I like to say that I don't have a problem with this application. I'm in support. I think the Pink Shell is a great business for this island. It's more of when we're discussing this, and there's several items that are going to come before us today that are related to the overall redevelopment and related to maybe policies that we're going to be looking at in the future. So the thought was just with regards to these liveaboards, I think when we look at the use itself, it's really a transient lodging use.
Mhm.
And as I said, don't have a problem with that use whatsoever. But when we start looking at other projects coming in and we compare density or intensity or number of rooms, that's a unit. That's a transient lodging unit in my mind. So I think when we compare, we compare others, let's compare apples to apples, and it could be on a boat, but it's still a transient lodging unit. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to use. And that was all. Like I said, I'm supportive, and I'll be voting in favor.
Very good comment. Jane?
Okay. There isn't anything in here that gives any requirements to preparing for a storm. Like the Red Coconut used to require all of their mobile units to be removed from the island when an evacuation order is put in place. I do feel that all of the boats should be required to be moved if an evacuation order comes into place so that the rest of the island doesn't become storers of these properties that were out in the water.
Sure. For Hurricane Ian, we require all the boats. If we go into a watch, we require all the boats to leave our docks. It's to our benefit because it rips the docks apart. So we do not allow them to stay at dockage. We had no boats in the marina for Ian. They're completely gone. We lost the docks because they floated up over the pilings and gone.
Right.
So
So you don't have a problem with that being added as a?
not at all. We would have any hurricane. We would have the boats leave the marina. We do it automatically.
Good. Okay.
Jim, any comments or questions?
No comments.
Scott?
No.
Don, you have any comments?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, conversation is concluded. Patrick, would you like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to recommend approval for the petition with the additional condition that was brought forward by Jane associated with evacuation and also with staff recommended conditions.
I
Okay.
second that.
So there's a motion and a second to approve the Pink Shell's amendment to their CPD and forward that recommendation on to the town council. Is there any other discussion? Your vote, Patrick?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
Scott?
Aye.
And I also vote in favor. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next item on the agenda is variance number 20220018. It is an 11-foot street setback reduction for a pool at 8189 Lagoon Road. 8180, Sarah or Jason, is that address corrected to 8180?
8180 Lagoon Road, yes.
Okay, it says 8189 in the packet. That's okay. That's all right. That's all right. I'd like to ask for any ex parte communications. Patrick?
Nope.
Doug?
No.
Don?
No.
Jane?
No.
Jim?
No.
Scott?
None.
And I have had none as well. All right. Let's ask the applicant to come forward.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning to you.
I have a couple of copies of what we filed at the last minute for staff.
I have to admit, I'm jealous of all your paper.
Yes, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was
It's all
going to
right.
apologize for all that paper.
No, it's our packet. Anyway, go ahead.
The lawyer in me thinks about making my record, so I sort of err on the side of giving you more paper rather than less. My name is Chris DaCosta. I'm an attorney. I'm indicated as an applicant only insofar as I am the authorized representative for the owners of the property. Janelle Schoonover. I have here with me today the contractor representative, Jason Tobias, who is available if you have any discussions about the project, and also Ed Schoonover. So this is a request for a variance under 34-87 of the code. In general, this is a request to facilitate a modification and somewhat of an expansion of the pool that is located on my client's property. While it's sort of stated as a request for a variance in a street setback, that's not really the way we see it. However, we're kind of left with what staff has told us they believe, and that's kind of puts us where we are today. And I'm going to get into that in more detail in a minute. Let's just talk a little bit about the property itself. The property was built in 2015. It sits in a residential neighborhood, maybe a couple blocks off of Estero Boulevard on the north side, and about a few miles, I guess, north of Carlos Point. It's in an RS zoned area. So, and I've included in your packet the pictures that I took. Before, obviously, this is before the storm, and if you want to know what's left after the storm, Ed's here, and he could probably tell you. Bottom line is, the configuration of the property is it's on the corner of Lagoon Road and Tarpon Road. The front of the house is on Lagoon Road, and in the back there's a screened-in pool. And we're sort of getting into kind of the crux of the matter. The house was built in 2015. The house, if you look at and we've submitted the site plan, existing site plan, the house sits, I think, about 14 feet maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, but please don't comment unless you're on the microphone. Thank you.
I
Go ahead.
apologize.
No, that's all right.
I looked to Jason to help me out with these details.
That's okay.
so
That's okay.
appreciate
I
that.
just want to make sure his comments are on the record.
So it's about 11 feet from the east lot line. And, the pool is caged in, but the actual project that my client would like to do is basically to take the pool cage out and build what I think is a beautiful design by Lucas Lagoons. It's kind of, instead of your standard rectangle situation, it's kind of neat. You can see it in your packet, and you can see it, like, I guess, in item number 10. I mean, it's kind of like your own kind of personal paradise. It's kind of shaped like a lagoon. And as I said before, there's not going to be a pool cage there. So
yeah, 199 is the diagram.
I'm gonna, in a little bit, I'm going to talk about the required findings under 3487, and there's 5 of them. One of them is exceptional circumstances, and I think it applies in this case. So what happened was that the home was built in 2015, presumably met approval of the building department. It was built, it got a CO, and it is sitting where it was designed to fit and where it was approved to be built. So when my client asked me to get involved, I went and met with staff who were very professional, and they explained their position to me. And their position was, much like some of the business that I understand is before the board now, we have a corner lot, and their position is we've got two 25-foot street setbacks. But when you actually look at what the code says, and I'm going to direct your attention to 34-638, and I don't want to bore you too much to get into the details of the code, but it's a couple of things. And if for your reference, that would be tab 5 in my supplement that I gave you today. And if you look at 638B, it says where to find minimum setback dimensions. It goes on for principal buildings, look at table 34.3. But for accessory buildings, see 34-1174 to 1176. And I mean, I don't think there's any dispute that the proposed pool is an accessory building, which at least based on, my reading of the code here, means that we look to that specific provision in the code 1174 to 1176 to determine what the setbacks are. But when you actually get to 1174, if you look at B, it says no accessory use building or structure shall be located closer to a street, right-of-way line, or street easement than the principal building. And then there's a number of exceptions that I don't think apply in this case. And in my experience, and I believe in Jason, the contractor's experience, that's kind of the typical setup. The pool cages are typically, a lot of times people just want them to run right up to the side of the building. In this case, where, the present configuration, the pool cage is a lot smaller, and all we're really doing is kind of moving the east edge of the pool to still short of the east wall of the building, but we're not going past that. And so at least, our reading of the code, just this plain reading, seems to suggest that, well, there may be street setbacks that would be applicable to the principal building. They're not applicable to a pool or other accessory structure. So we kind of have a situation, and I'm sure staff will have some discussion about this, but it seems to me we've got obviously a difference of opinion on what the code allows. And we also have the issue of, house wasn't built that long ago. I mean, I think what the staff is telling me is that maybe the house should never have been built where it was built, but we're kind of stuck with that. And so as it stands now, even under the proposed design, the edge of the pool isn't getting past the eastern wall of the principal building, and therefore it should be allowed. So again, getting into the required findings, I know that you're well familiar with them, but I will take you through them a little bit. The first one, that there are any exceptional, extraordinary conditions or circumstances that are inherent to property or question, or the request is for a de minimis variance under circumstances or conditions where rigid compliance is not essential to protect public policy. Kind of a mouthful there. And again, I think we've detailed a number of things relating to the situation that we think are exceptional or extraordinary. And I think some of that kind of relates to matters that are before the board now relating to the configuration of corner lots. Even if you take the position, staff's position that you have two street setbacks on the property, we still have this problem of, from a planning standpoint, how do you deal with that and facilitate development? The second prong is the conditions justifying the variance are not the result of actions of the applicant taken after the adoption of the regulation in question. I'm not sure exactly when this regulation was adopted. Looking through some of the things that are on the docket for today, it appears that back in the distant past, maybe 2003, there was a change in which the side setbacks in a corner lot situation was changed Either way, our position is that really isn't relevant for today. What is relevant is that the setback, the only setback requirement that would apply would be the accessory one in 1174B. My client hasn't done anything. Now I know one of the things that staff put in their report was they said, well, this is a design choice. I mean, it is. It's a design choice, but I guess what I would say about that is, most requests for variances involve some level of design choice by the property owner. The situation here was largely dictated by the unique configuration of the property. The third prong is that the variance granted as the minimum variance will relieve the applicant of an unreasonable burden caused by the application of the regulation in question to his property. Again, we believe that the application of a street setback on the side is an unreasonable burden. And I would state simply that the purpose of land regulations is to facilitate development, but also provide property owners with notice as to what is expected and what is prohibited. I would submit that the uncertainty and ambiguity presented here is contrary to the public interest. And I know that Lucas Lagoons is taking great care to minimize the footprint of the pool while still keeping its design essence. The fourth prong is the granting of the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. I mean, I don't think anybody says that it is. And in fact, in your packet, I've provided a number of letters from the neighbors. That's for your reference, tab 10 in my supplemental. It really, I mean, if you look at it, there's nothing. I mean, we're actually getting rid of the pool cage. So all it's really going to be is a really beautiful looking pool. It's not going to stop traffic. It's really no safety issues. And then the final one, that the conditions or circumstances on the specific piece of property for which the variance is sought are not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make it more reasonable and practical to amend the regulation in question. Again, I think if you ask my client has no way of knowing whether there should be a change to the current regulation. I think our main point is that the accessory setback should apply, not the street the principal building street setback. But in any event, that's a value judgment that's kind of beyond what we are looking at. We only ask that the government follow what its own regulations state in plain English. Ed, do you have anything you want to say? Okay. All right, and that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Jane?
So just for a visual, since there isn't one in the package, does the pool extend beyond the footprint of the building?
No. And it actually is, and if you look at the application, I know it's not in my packet here. If you look in the application, you can see it stops actually just short of it. So it is not closer to the street than the building.
Any questions at all from anyone for the applicant?
Don?
Oh, Don, do you have a question?
No question. Jane just answered it.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Jason?
Good morning. For the record, Jason Smalley with the Planning and Zoning Department. Good morning to all the LPA members and the applicant. So a couple things that we wanted to go ahead and put out there. First of all, when we talk about the setback requirements and the language that it not protrude further streetward than the primary structure, we have to remember that there's two areas of concern there. Not only that it doesn't go forward of the structure, but also that it meets the minimum setbacks, which for a street setback for structures is 25 feet. So remember that just because they're not going forward of the structure, that doesn't mean that they haven't that they've met all of the requirements of the setback code. I would also go back to an argument here that was presented regarding the code section here in tab 5. I will point out that the A code in there, the A subsection gives the director the ability on lots where it's questionable to determine which of those lot lines are which, whether they be street, side, or otherwise. So we take that as being able to determine if that meets the street setback, and we look at the rest of the neighborhood, does it meet the intent of how the other structures were developed? So I wanted to put that out there. There's wide latitude for staff determine which setbacks we're actually applying here. I don't think there's any question that in the past and currently, it was understood that this pool would have street setbacks. If you go back and look at the original pool permitting from 2014, you'll notice that they developed the pool at a 26-foot setback. So at some point, somebody recognized that the pool structure should have a street setback. How the house ended up at approximately 11 feet setback, there really isn't a good record. At that point, 2014-15, the permitting was being split between Lee County for structural and the town for planning and zoning purposes, to my understanding. But the record doesn't go to speak about what decisions were made as to why it was set at 10 feet. As opposed to a 25-foot setback. But I think, again, just looking at the pool, you can see that somebody at some point during the pool permitting understood that there should be a street setback applied to that structure. We would also point out here that while the design may be absolutely gorgeous, again, in the eye of the beholder, they do have a roughly 20.5-foot setback currently to what we would consider the rear lot line, or the neighbor, the lot line shared with the neighbor on Tarpon. So there is relatively good amount of space if they wanted to extend the pool further back without attempting to go into the street setbacks along Tarpon. So there are options, and that's what staff was looking at when the staff report was created. We are open for any questions that may not have been addressed so far in either of the presentations.
Thank you, Jason. Questions? Patrick?
Yes. I'm entire packet. I went back and I looked at the code. Maybe help me out here. I'm having trouble interpreting the code the way staff is doing it with regards to the table with all the setbacks applying to accessory structures. The way I read it is it applies to the principal structures, and then we have a whole other section, several sections that deal with accessory uses. So in my mind, the table wasn't intended for principal and accessory because we deal with them elsewhere.
Mhm.
And even when it comes to pools, it goes back and it actually refers back to the section where it says you can't exceed the street setback. So to me, it was intentional, and there's that nexus throughout. So A, if you could explain that. And then B, you mentioned the rear setback. So the rear setback would be the same as a principal setback?
No, an accessory setback would be much less restrictive, and they could get as close as 5 feet to a rear.
So the accessory setback where it does say 5 feet is in a separate section and does not deal with that table. So, and that's what I mean is that we've created a section to deal with accessory uses, and that's why I'm not using the main table for those, just for principal uses.
Fair enough. So if you look at the accessory structure setbacks, you'll notice that they, for the most part, don't actually deal a lot with the front or street setbacks. And the way that it's been interpreted internally in the department is because they should have the same setbacks for a house. They should be held to the same standards as a primary structure, whether that be for aesthetic purposes or any other purpose that the code was made. If it's read a bit circular, I can take that point. But again, here it's been applied consistently, at least in the time that I've been here and the records I can find, that the understanding is we want the primary structure to be up and out front, hence the reason for not having the accessory structures go forward of the primary structure. And in that case, it would seem a little odd to then look back at this and say, but just for corner lots that may have been given a non-standard setback, we would then allow by right them to be much closer to the road than if it had been given a 25-foot setback. I hope that sort of addresses your question.
Yeah, yeah, it addresses how staff gets there. Yeah.
Did staff get a legal opinion on it?
There wasn't a necessity for a legal opinion at this point. We just look back at the precedent that we've applied for particularly corner lots. And we understand that in some circumstances it can be restrictive, but it was never elevated to a town attorney for a decision on the code language.
Other questions for staff? Scott? Don, do you have any questions?
No, I guess kind of a question or a comment. You know, when I look at pools, I do look at them as an accessory structure if they're on the ground. I look at them as a structure if they're above ground, because we do address both of those. So I guess my question is, how is this different? Is it just because it's a corner that it's treated differently, or is it because when I look at, like, if you're on a seawall, you can build a pool on the ground within 5 feet, and it's an accessory structure. If you build an elevated pool, it's got to be 25 feet, I think, whether it's side or back. Am I correct?
Yes. Jason, you want to comment on that?
So the pool structure, I don't know that it makes a difference on the side or on a street, whether it's elevated or not. We would, again, refer back to the intent in the code seemingly to not have accessory structures that extend further than the house. I think the crux of the issue here mainly is that there is a little bit of a gap in understanding about how that structure in particular ended up only 11 feet off of one of the streets. And that is, I think, confounding all of the other logic that the staff would use going forward. If this thing were set back at a normal 25 feet, I don't think there would be any question that the intent is not to allow the pool, again, to go further towards the street.
Any other questions, Don?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll open the public hearing portion of this case. Is there anybody that'd like to speak? Mr. Steele?
My name is Jim Steele. I live at 170 Tarpon Road, which is about across the street. The applicant has a beautiful open air iron fence around his property, and the pool is not as wide as the house. And in my opinion, why can't he make the pool as wide as the house? So I totally support the applicant.
Thank you very much, Jim. All right, come on up, my friend.
My name is Bill Pullman. I live at 8170 Lagoon Road. My wife and I have lived next door to this property for 15 years. We feel that this would be a great addition to the beautification of the entire neighborhood, and we find nothing obtrusive about this at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? All right, the public comment portion is closed. Council, any questions for the applicant or for staff? LPA, oh God, yeah, bad habit. LPA.
If I may make one more suggestion,
ahead,
if I
Jason.
could. I noticed in the application that There are no requirements if the LPA decides to approve this. I would just remind them that on previous variances that were approved for pools, that there was a hedge requirement to buffer the street and vision along the road from the pool or other accessory structure. It may be prudent to also request that if you decide to approve this project.
Okay. If there's no other questions or discussions, is there a motion?
I have just a little bit of discussion. And I think at this point, it's unique because there is no rhyme or reason to the side setback of the 11 whatever feet, but it is there and existing, and any other house would be able to go to the edges of the building. So I really don't have any problem with accepting the building as it is and allowing the pool to be designed as any other pool would be. So I do think it's exceptional and does meet the findings and conditions.
I concur with what Jane said from meeting the criteria. I think there's enough that's been presented about an existing building that doesn't seem to meet the setbacks, and that causes an exceptional condition. So I think it does meet it. However, I'm in agreement with the applicant that I do not believe that the setback is the same as the principal structure. It's my interpretation, and I know that, you know, we might see it differently. And I understand that you guys are stuck between interpreting precedents, and I'm looking at the clear language in the code. And at least from looking at the clear language in the code, that's what I'm going with. And I think that's our responsibility as a town when there might be a difference in interpretation and how precedents have been done versus the code, we correct the code. So I will support a motion for a variance. I don't think it's needed. And also, I'd just like to emphasize that, especially in light of the corner setback amendments that we are going to be looking at shortly, I think that approving this is also consistent, most likely with the direction we're going.
Doug, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm inclined to approve this variance primarily for, in my mind, two reasons. Excellent points. One is it appears all the neighbors supported from the emails and stuff included in the package, and then the testimony of two public speakers. And then it's unfortunately, you know, the house is 11 feet from the road, I guess. How that happened, it happened. But it would make sense to me that it would be then systematic and from aesthetically that the pool, which looks really nice, could align with the edge of the house as well, just like it would if the house was at the proper setback. So for those two reasons, I'm inclined to approve it.
Okay. All right. Well, would somebody like to make a motion since you all are inclined to approve this?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may, I just make this observation. I don't necessarily think that it's going to affect the outcome of this board's decision, but I want to remind everyone that the basis for approving or denying an application that comes before you, particularly in a quasi-judicial item, is whether or not the applicant has met through competent substantial evidence that they meet the criteria in the code. Unless the neighbors are commenting specifically to the criteria in the code, then whether or not the neighbors agree or disagree or are in favor or not in favor is not in and of itself sufficient to carry the responsibility of the applicant to demonstrate through competent substantial evidence that they meet the requirements of the code. It's the you know, when speakers speak, if they want to, it really should be directed to the criteria in the code, not, oh, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, not that they can't, but that's not, those kinds of comments cannot be used by the board members for reliance upon and finding that the criteria have been met.
I didn't know that.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Jane.
I would like to make a motion to approve the 11-foot street setback reduction for the pool located at 8189 Lagoon Road. I believe it does meet the findings and conclusions. And I would like to add a condition of the standard vegetation hedge required by the pool.
I'm sure it's.
I'll second that.
Donna seconding that.
It's 8180. She said
Oh,
8189.
8180.
Corrected, 8180.
Okay, there's a motion and there's a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. Jane?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
And I'll vote in favor. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for your presentation. Would the LPA like a break, or do you want to keep going?
Break.
Okay, we're going to break for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back for the next variance. Thank you. Oy, ay, ay, ay.
like after, but we're going to show you in a few slides what it's going to look like. So it's the location of the old Shipwreck Motel, and the parking lot has been used for some time as a public parking lot, a shared public parking lot. So if you go on to the next slide, the first request, as Ms. Saracita said, is for a special exception. We're asking for a special exception to extend the shared parking lot. In March 2014, Council granted a special exception to allow for the operation of a 62-space shared parking lot on this property. Those 62 spaces were shown on what is highlighted in yellow in the pictures that you see on that slide. Those are snippets from the applicable subdivision plats. We are asking that you recommend approval of a request just to extend that special exception to what is shown in green to allow for 40 additional parking spaces. In addition to the special exception, if you turn to the next slide, we are asking for a variance. There are we're asking for several variances. There are several provisions of the code that we're asking for variances from, but what I would say is that these variances are to allow for the parking lot to operate safely and efficiently. So the application discusses them in detail, but they can be summarized as variances to allow for parking on the side and rear of the remaining building with no visibility triangle. And we actually do have a visibility triangle. It's just reduced. I'll tell you about that as well. A buffer comprised of a 4-foot tall white picket fence with climbing jasmine and reduced parking space sizes, which have been used by the applicant in his other parking lots without any incident. So if you turn to the next page, this is to show you a little bit more of what we're planning to do. If the special exception is approved and the variance is approved, several buildings will be removed with what is outlined in red remaining. So you'll see just the one large building is what will remain. The hotel off to the side, the hotel rooms will be removed, and the little white building in the lower southwest corner was already removed for us. As you can see, you can't see, but what I'll point out to you is that we're going to be removing one entrance where you see at the bottom of the circle on the survey page, that is an entrance right now. We'll be closing that and only allowing access into the parking lot where the arrow is pointing in at the south of the site, which is actually the
Third Street?
The south of, no,
Second Street.
Yes. And then exit only onto 3rd Street.
Entrance on San Carlos.
Well, it's on, yes, I'm sorry. The entrance is from San Carlos, and then you'll be exiting onto 3rd Street. This keeps traffic moving in a forward pattern and relegates exiting vehicles to a much less pedestrian used street. Additionally, the handicap spaces have been located immediately adjacent to the sidewalk, facilitating a handicapped individual's exit from his or her vehicle and allowing for a more fluid and shortest path of travel along Old San Carlos to the entrance into the building or to other downtown areas. Going to the next slide, I've included the provision from the code relative to the downtown zoning district. Here is to highlight for you that the downtown district has been identified as the center of pedestrian-oriented commercial activities, and it has been designated to operate as a park once, under the park once philosophy, with Old San Carlos being Main Street. All right, so we also have a similar provision on the next slide in your comprehensive plan. The future land use designation given to this property is pedestrian commercial, with Old San Carlos being identified as an intense activity center. And as your comprehensive plan currently provides, it not only encourages, but requires pedestrian-friendly design in the pedestrian commercial district. The request before you today is in furtherance of this policy, and that it will provide for expansion of a centrally located parking area to encourage visitors to park once and go. I recognize that you have before you today proposed amendments to your comprehensive plan. One of those amendments is to discourage new surface parking lots in favor of parking garages. What I would say is, for two reasons, that even if that was adopted, would not apply to us because this is an existing lot. We're just expanding. And two, I would also just note that your land development code for some time has identified 3 locations for a parking garage, all of which are on Old San Carlos, none of which have been developed. So no private property owner has taken that on. So I did want to just point that out because I know you will be talking about that later today, and I would hope that you would consider this to be an exception to that. Next, on slide 8, what we have is 2 prior conditions, because as I mentioned, this was approved prior in 2014 for the special exception and the variances. So staff has expressed some concern with regard to these prior conditions because they expressed that once the property is redeveloped, that it needs to come into compliance with the code. And they are considering that removing a building and putting in new spots is considered redevelopment. So what I would like to point out in response to those points is that there's nothing in the applicable resolution that prohibits future variances, either from us asking for them or from the town approving them. There's similarly nothing in the code that only allows for one bite at the apple, which is staff's interpretation, which is what staff's interpretation would lend itself to. Even so, we do not believe that you have to go that far with the analysis because based on our reading of the code, what we are proposing is not redevelopment. There are 24 instances of the term redevelopment in the land development code, but none include a definition. The provision relative to redevelopment in the section of the code addressing variances refers to redevelopment as the act of building back, in that it refers to complying with setback and height regulations. Site work alone is not contemplated. On the next slide is another applicable code provision that supports our conclusion that this is not redevelopment. As it relates to application of commercial design standards to redevelopment, the code provides that they only apply to newly built buildings and to substantial improvements to those newly built buildings. Here, we are only asking to remove some of the existing buildings with nothing to be built back in their place. As such, we are not proposing to redevelop, and even if the town were to conclude that no additional variances can be permitted upon redevelopment, what is proposed will not act as a trigger. As I mentioned, there are several variance requests that we have asked for. Staff has gone through them individually and made some comments with the short time from when the staff report was issued and today. We've talked with staff. We've given staff some clarification, but I'd like to give you clarification as well because I know there were some questions. Again, the list is just to allow for safe operation of a pedestrian-friendly downtown parking lot. They were originally requested to allow for continued use of the parking lot consistent with the parking across the street, which has been approved as part of a commercial plan development. After the town of, which had been approved as a commercial plan development. After the town adopted its land development code, a request was made to rezone to a conventional zoning district, but with variances to allow for the continued use of the parking lot. These same variances were applied to most of the property that is issued today with the 2014 approval. Okay, going to the next slide. The list of variances included with this request is essentially identical to the variances that were approved with the previous resolution. Staff previously offered a recommendation of approval of the variances, whereas they have now recommended denial. Here I've included a snippet of the previous staff report together with a snippet from the minutes of the previous LPA meeting at which staff supported a change to one of the recommended conditions, but still was in favor of the request. And on the next page, you'll see that we had unanimous approval from the LPA and from town council when we came before you previously. On the next slide, this is where one of the visuals was included to provide you with an idea of what we're talking about. We're not asking that we not provide any landscaping. With respect to the variance from the required landscape buffer between an off-street parking lot and public street, staff notes that this does not, that we're not specifying the type of landscaping that we're proposing. So these pictures are provided solely for demonstrative purposes, but to give you an idea of what is intended. It'll be a 4-foot white picket fence with crawling jasmine so that it will actually serve as an opaque buffer between the parking lot and the adjacent rights of way. This will allow for continued operation of the existing parking lot and the adjacent rights of way. This will allow for continued operation without requiring a very substantial redesign. And it is a request that is consistent with many other parking lots within the town, including those located at 150 Crescent Street and 1397, 1478, 1510, and 2440 Estero Boulevard. Going on to the next slide. We are requesting a variance from the code provision that requires that parking lots be located behind the buildings. As noted previously, only the building outlined in red will remain. The buildings outlined in blue either have been or will be demolished, and nothing is currently proposed to be built in their place. Rather, this area will be used for parking until the property is redeveloped, if that happens at some point in the future. With the current condition of the site, it's very difficult for us to come back with a new building at this time. So it's been strategically planned for future redevelopment, and we'd like to be able to use it now for continuing the use of a parking lot. There's another picture just to show you why we're requesting the next variance. This is a variance from the code provision that requires cross access with parking on adjacent properties. I wanted to show you this larger aerial because it demonstrates how this requirement cannot be met through no fault of the applicant. The small building in the southwest corner of the site, as I mentioned, was demolished, and there's buildings on adjacent sites that make travel and parking behind those buildings impossible. There are buildings behind all of the buildings between ours and Estero Boulevard. So there's no way to either travel or park behind those buildings. Next, we're talking about the variance for tiered parking, and we're actually going to request that we withdraw that variance request. The reason being is that we do not believe that what we are proposing is tiered parking, and we didn't realize that until after we made the request. There's not actually a definition in your code of what tiered parking means. This is actually the only reference to tiered parking in the entire code. And so we had to go outside the code, and it was hard to find. When I put in tiered parking, these are the pictures that come back. There's not a very good definition other than the freedictionary.com does define it as parking that's on top of each other. So it would be applied to a parking garage, not a surface parking lot. So what we're asking for is to actually withdraw that request because it's not needed. We're not proposing tiered parking. All right, the next one, I mentioned this earlier. This is a request from a variance from the visibility triangle requirement. And we're asking for no visibility triangle, but we are actually providing just a shortened visibility triangle in that what the code requires is there's no visibility triangle on the Old San Carlos side, which is fine because we're not actually exiting onto Old San Carlos. Can you all still hear me okay?
Yeah,
I know
we can hear you
it's
fine.
okay.
Oh, but you know what? This is nothing compared to what we've done.
I can
So
imagine.
I'm enduring it.
Okay, good. But what your code provides is that 5 feet setback and 100 feet wide is what your visibility triangle is. So I know it's going to be hard to see, but in your strip that you have here, you go back 5 feet and 100 feet. And what that does is it actually puts it right past our exit because the exit's at 80 feet. So what we're proposing, if you remember the site plan earlier, is we're trying to simplify the movement through the parking lot in that it will go straight forward, coming off Old San Carlos, straight through and out with no turns being needed. If we met the visibility triangle requirement, we'd have to move the exit 20 feet back. And so people would have to jog to get out. And we're trying to just go straight out. So what we wanted to do is just ask for that, not necessarily for no visibility triangle, but for a reduced visibility triangle. We're also only going to be putting in a 4-foot white picket fence, so it'll be low and still allow for visibility. On the next slide, you'll see that the staff has made a comment about neighborhood compatibility and seems to conclude that parking is not needed in this area because parking lots appear to cover more area of the downtown than any other land use. Notwithstanding, as been highlighted earlier, both the applicable zoning and future land use designations specifically identify this area as one that is to be pedestrian friendly and could encourage a park once philosophy. The town's own comprehensive plan, provisions of which are copied onto this slide, encourages this type of parking so that each individual use does not need to provide parking. The next slide is actually refers back to an earlier statement I made with regard to the location of the parking garages. This is just a map that shows that this area of downtown has been highlighted and identified as appropriate for parking. Here, parking garages, but you'll see I've outlined in red where our location is. So we're actually in between two of those locations. Okay. Final slide, you'll see staff has recommended denial of both of our requests, even though we have demonstrated that we meet the criteria for the requested special exception and variances. It seems that staff's only concern with the special exception is, as laid out, we have designed a parking lot that requires variances that staff feels cannot be granted based on the conditions found in the earlier resolution. However, as previously noted, there is nothing in the code or the resolution that prohibits the property owner from asking or the town council from approving another variance. As it relates to the variances, we have demonstrated that the site is uniquely situated in an area of town that has been identified as appropriate for shared parking with the necessary variances to accommodate the downtown building requirements, such as the build to lines that take precedence over setbacks and visibility triangles provided safety can be ensured. The site has been designed with safety in mind, especially with the traffic pattern, keeping traffic moving in a forward momentum with the only entrance on San Carlos and the only exit on 3rd Street. Based on the foregoing, we would respectfully request that the LPA recommend approval of both the special exception and the variances that were requested, except for the variance with regard to tiered parking. We've withdrawn that, or will. And if you have any questions, I will.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions for Ms. Spector? Any questions? Dawn, do you have any questions?
I have one. This is really basic, but why do you need more parking spaces?
To provide parking for downtown because there is never enough parking, but I can have, do you want to speak to that, Mr. Richard?
John Richard, for the record, may I approach?
Thanks, John.
Ask why we need more parking?
Yes, sir.
The future. We remember last year how much, how the shortage of parking we had. And as we further develop, we're going to definitely need more parking. I would love to have Kara Stewart up to help answer any other questions.
So that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Oh, sure.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
I got a few questions. I'm looking at the various.
Kara, are you coming up to speak?
Yeah, please.
Looking at the variances that are being requested, and some of them have been addressed by Sarah. Makes sense. There's also variances associated with buffering and landscape islands.
Buffering.
Okay. And please explain why the variances are needed. From what I could tell, they could be provided. The impact would be that you guys would lose a few parking spaces. So if the parking spaces are not needed to meet a minimum requirement, for example, I'm having trouble justifying those variances for landscaping that could be provided.
Kara Stewart, for the record. I would just like to clarify, when you're saying the landscaping to be provided, are you referring to internal landscaping or the buffer?
Both internal landscape islands and
the buffers?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's address the buffers first. The buffer on Old San Carlos, we'd given a lot of thought to that because trying to accommodate our handicap parking as well in the most apropos area and location to exit and to encourage that ability for folks to walk along Old San Carlos Boulevard. We have those placed directly on the side, right at the sidewalk. We thought with this type of buffer, the 4 foot and some night blooming jasmine or some such thing like that, it would give us the ability to have easy access ways to those areas. To those areas from the parking lot. The perimeter on the side, once again, trying to take into account on 3rd Street, the visibility triangle, which I would also like to furtherance on that visibility triangle. The proposed 4 foot fence with landscaping will also assist with the visibility at that location. The location of that exit on 3rd Street is also restricted, as Sarah started to mention and mentioned a little bit. We're confined with our existing structure of shipwreck and that aisleway going through. So I can't move that building, which would then help me shift that driveway. I was leaving that building in place gives me the ability to then come in, park, exit onto 3rd Street, which I think we all want, instead of exiting onto Old San Carlos, and allowing the customer to then leave. So that leaves us with internal landscaping. We do have locations identified on the plan for internal landscaping. We were anticipating with the 4 foot along Old San Carlos, we have back an aisle or two. It's actually one aisle. There's 2 rows of parking. We've got another location for landscaping. I believe the code requires trees. We were kind of discussing, we left it open because we were thinking instead of just asking for a variance from the landscaping, we thought we'd throw it out there. Maybe we want, or maybe LPA would like, or council would like, something different than what the code is requiring in order to offset the fact that we're only proposing to do that one landscaped area. The site is being planned, as Sarah.
For example?
For example, if you want hedges or, whatever, right, whatever, not sail shades, but yeah, something, in that area. We left it open. We didn't define it, kind of looking for some feedback. I forgot what I was just going to say now. What was the other one? The landscaping guy?
Yeah, let me just interject. As far as
Yeah.
the buffers, as far as the buffers go, the white picket fence with the night blooming jasmine, I think is going to be beautiful. It's already been approved. Same exact thing on Crescent Street on the 150 lot on there. I mean, I live right next to that. The one thing I'll say is I want this to be beautiful. I do not, I've been here a long time. I'm going to be here a long time. So we've made a lot of areas, the corners of the thing, that's going to be trees, whatever you want. Here, more trees. Here, more trees. Once that motel goes down, the building goes down, you're going to have a beautiful view of the lagoon. I'm very passionate about it, but Kara can speak better than I can. So, any more questions?
The other note that Sarah mentioned was in relationship to the design of the lot. We have designed this also at this time to take on, of course, all of our drainage, and we're doing an exfiltration system, and that's being located towards the rear of the property for obvious, if there was ever redevelopment there, that it would be set up in the correct manner and take care of that at the same time.
We're taking one exit off Old San Carlos that used to exit into Old San Carlos. That's gone. It's all a benefit to the public.
Patrick, were your questions answered?
Yeah, I got one more question with regards to the dimensional standards. I think you've touched upon the back of the building and the width you have there, and that's justified. Elsewhere in the parking lot, can you describe where the dimensions would change and why they're needed?
The dimensions are actually, we've designed the entire parking lot, absent, of course, the handicap spots, with reduced parking dimensions, partly because John has been operating a parking lot across the street for 20-something years with those reduced dimensions. When I believe the town had engaged in a consultant to start looking at parking at some time ago. And at that time, the reduced sizes were also addressed. So in light of that and the fact that we have found over time that they work just as succinctly as a larger parking space, we're asking for the request. We believe that the code needs to, in that case, maybe be changed.
And I would add that I would request that they stay permanent with the lot, and I don't have to go through this again.
What?
The dimensions of the parking spaces, they
Okay.
work. I've been working for 20 years. I'm there every day. So thank you.
I don't think anybody's been in that area longer than, like, you know it like the back of your hand. Okay, Doug, any questions for Mr. Richard or Ms. Stewart? No. Jim, question?
I do have some, but I want to hear from staff.
Okay. Scott, any questions?
No, but I want to do ex parte that I did meet with.
Yeah, I forgot to ask that.
I
Okay.
met with Karen and John yesterday and
Okay.
toured the site.
I apologize for that. So Doug has, Scott has ex parte. Jim, have you spoken with anybody about this project? Jim?
No, I have not.
Jane?
I got a phone call, but I didn't get it returned in time. Sorry.
Okay. Doug, any ex parte?
No ex parte.
And Patrick?
No ex parte.
And I spoke with John. So, and no, none from you, Don? Okay, thank you. All right. Anybody else have questions for the applicant? Sarah, I have a question for you. And John, you can chime in if you want. Okay, so the conflict between the existing resolution approval for your temporary parking lot, what I'm wondering is this special exception ultimately just an expansion of a temporary lot? Because that to me triggers the redevelopment word. So if you're going, no. Well, let me just give you my rationale here. So now this is going to be a permanent parking lot. So that's what this will be, because I think go ahead. All right. Explain to me the special exception conflict with the previous approval.
The previous approval was for a permanent shared parking lot. It wasn't on a temporary basis. It was for till perpetuity.
Okay.
The caveat, I believe it's item 3 in one of the conditions, says at further, and I'm quasi quoting it, but the gist of it is that if there is redevelopment and or a building permit, the conditions the variances go away. Meaning, if the site is redeveloped, that variance goes away, and he needs
John
to
were
do.
to expand Shipwreck, for example.
If he were to build, because
Build
when we
something.
talk about redevelopment, we're talking about a new building and or something greater than a 50% remodeling of a structure. We are not doing that. So we are politely, respectfully disagreeing that it's a redevelopment. We feel that this is no more than just a demolition of a building and a parking lot that we need to request a special exception for, because part of it is not included in the original approval. So we're expanding an existing special exception.
Expanding the existing special exception. Okay.
Correct.
Anybody else have a question on that? No? Okay. Thank you guys very much. And we'll go on to your presentation, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Probst. I'm going to apologize up front because this is a very long staff report for me, or a presentation for me. John Richard, owner of 237 Old San Carlos, has requested a special exception for expansion of a permanent shared parking lot in the downtown zoning district. A portion of the property was approved for a permanent shared parking lot by SEZ 2013-0006. The applicant is requesting 7 variances from the perimeter buffering, internal landscaping, parking lot location, parking lot interconnection, internal crosswalks, and the visibility triangle. The previous special exception was accompanied by a variance, including all of the variances included in this application, except for the pedestrian systems. This is new to this variance request. This was variance 2013-0007. Permanent shared parking lots are a permitted use in the downtown zoning district with approval of a special exception. The current parking lot is approved for 62 parking spaces on a portion of the parcel. The area approved for the parking is shown in yellow highlight on the third page of the staff report you received. The applicant is requesting an expansion of 40 spaces in the green highlighted area on the same graphic. In addition to the request for a special exception, the applicant is requesting 7 variances to the location and design requirements for a parking lot. The variance request includes the internal landscaping found in section 10-416C2 be waived. This section includes trees, 10% internal landscaping area, landscaping islands between every 10 parking spaces, and ground cover. 2, the perimeter buffer requirement found in section 10-416D and 34677B3, which requires a type D buffer 15 feet wide with 5 trees per 100 linear feet and 3-foot tall double staggered hedges. The applicant is proposing a 4-foot tall white picket fence with landscaping, although there are no plantings specified and no buffer width was proposed in the application. The applicant is requesting a variance from the location requirements found in section 34676C, which requires parking lots in the rear yard in the downtown district. A note on this request: the previous approved variance included the following condition associated with this variance. Number 3, at the time of redevelopment, the parking lot variance allowing a front and side parking lot must come into compliance and be relocated to the rear of the subject property. 4, the applicant is requesting a variance to parking lot interconnectivity found in 34676C. This requirement is to decrease the number of driveways on Old San Carlos. The applicant has indicated that the adjacent property is developed in a way that would not allow connectivity. 5, the applicant is requesting a variance from the pedestrian system requirement found in section 34215.7. This requires walkways to accommodate safe and convenient pedestrian movement where more than one tier of parking spaces is developed. The applicant believes that this may not apply at this time. It's still part of the application packet we received. 6, the applicant is proposing a variance to the parking lot dimensions found in section 34-2016-1 and 2. A note on this request: the previous approved variance included the following condition associated with this variance. Number 2, applicant may utilize the parking dimension described in variance number 5 above. However, at the time of redevelopment or the application of a building permit for the subject property, the parking space dimensions must come into compliance with all provisions of section 34-2016. 7, the applicant is requesting a variance from the visibility triangle found in section 34-3131. Old San Carlos Boulevard does not have a visibility triangle requirement. The applicant is proposing the same for the entrance on 3rd Street. Staff notes that the proposed fence would be a violation of the visibility triangle unless modified. In staff's opinion, the special exception must be or may be appropriate in this location. However, the variances do little to make the use compatible with the downtown and to soften the aesthetics of the parking lot in a pedestrian area. Additionally, the conditions of the previous variance appear to preclude the ability to grant the location and dimension variance requests, including the location which is key to expanding this use along 3rd Street. Therefore, staff recommends that the LPA recommend denial of SEZ 2022-0095 and variance VAR 2022-0094. I'm available to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here.
That's a doozy. Okay, questions for staff? Scott?
Would you agree with the applicant that this is not a redevelopment?
Because the code fails to define redevelopment, I think the issue is maybe this is called a permanent shared parking lot. They are redeveloping a portion of it to become a permanent shared parking lot. That's what they're asking for. It appears to be a parking lot as of now. However, it didn't have a special exception for those areas that they're requesting it for. So If they're asking for a new use on that section of property, that is a redevelopment of the site, even if it isn't strictly a building being redeveloped. Additionally, several buildings were demolished, not something that they intended to have happen, but that does redevelop the site. It changes the site quite a bit, and allows this additional potential use for the site. So I think that you could go both ways on it, but it is redeveloping the site in a different way.
A question on that issue. So, notwithstanding the definition of redevelopment, and if this is redevelopment or not, you've got variances that are approved, and should they stay with their current approval, those are in place. Does it not open you up for assessment and new regulations once you come back in and you add property and you change that previous approval?
If I could try and answer that, I think what we have here is really a two-stage process. One, whether to grant the special exception to expand the existing use. It is an existing use, and it currently doesn't meet the existing use by virtue of the variances, does not meet all the requirements of the code. If you expand that use under our code, you're supposed to bring the entire site up to code, and thus the request for variances. So you don't get to the variances unless you are inclined to grant the special exception. And under normal circumstances, when you expand a use, you bring the entire site into conformity with the regulations. Absent variances.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Anybody else have questions for Sarah or Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I've got two quick questions. First question, can you address the tiered parking? If you guys support the assessment from the applicant, I know it's in their application, but do you agree with them? And then can you talk about, does the code provide any provisions with compact parking lot spaces, reduced parking spaces?
In regard to the tiered parking, it was my understanding that this was realistically, when you design a parking lot, you should have pedestrian pathways. I think that that's a standard safety. I mean, you go to a grocery store, you go to any parking lot, there are going to be crosswalks. I think that that is what this code is requesting. Our code does not define tiered though. So if you were to choose to define that term as multiple levels, then maybe you could say that crosswalks are not required. Although I think crosswalks are a common safety feature that you would want in a parking lot. We're encouraging people to walk. We probably want to give them a safe way to cross a parking lot.
Could a crosswalk be as simple as a hatching on the ground? Because we don't define it in code.
Yes, I mean, that's a typical way you define a crosswalk, with hatching on the ground or different type of pavement. You know, you could put in different bricks or something, just a way so that people have a defined path so they're not just wandering around through a parking lot. Here's your path, take that. Theoretically, you're going to be safer. Whether they use it or not, that's their own choice.
Any other questions for staff?
Is there, in the development code or in the building code, I don't see any lighting on this plan. Is there any requirement for lighting?
I believe that there would be some requirements for lighting. They aren't that far in the process, though. We don't typically require them to provide all the components of the parking lot this early because they're asking for the use. That helps save on engineering costs up front.
So the applicant would like to make a clarification, but Kara, just hold still because I'm going to open the public hearing and then I'll come back to you. If there are no other questions, Dawn, do you have any questions? Okay. Is there any, I'll open the public portion part of this. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on this case? Seeing none, I'll close that section. And Kara, if you'd like to come up again. And this will be your opportunity, LPA, to ask any questions of applicant. Go ahead, Kara.
Because I continually lose sleep, I was up the other morning at 6 a.m. and looked at LPA for the discussion on the tiered parking, because I also was confused and like, wait a minute, when I go places, I don't think I've ever seen this. I could not find any parking lot on the beach other than for a handicap passageway. So that was what brought me to go look up definition and try to pursue it a little further. So although it might be a good idea, and we want to think that people won't save themselves in a parking lot, it's not a requirement. And the tiered parking, again, is not applicable at this point because it is for subsequent layers, which if you think about that, that makes all sense in the world to get yourself down. So that being said, I just wanted to clarify.
Anybody have any follow-up questions for the applicant? None?
Thank you.
Anyone have any follow-up? Sarah, go ahead.
Patrick had asked about compact parking spaces. I don't
Yes.
believe that our code currently contains anything for that.
It does not? Sarah, what was variance number 3?
That is parking lots in the rear yard.
Okay. And so the number 5, the fifth variance is this tiered parking, and the applicant has asked to withdraw that variance request. So we're going to remove, without it, unless somebody objects, we're going to remove number 5 from the variance request, taking it from 7 to 6. Okay. Do you have any objection to that, Sarah? Okay.
If I may, I think we want to clarify in the record that we believe that it does not apply. Again, when they go through the permitting process, let's make it clear.
Okay. Okay. So is there any other conversation or questions for the staff? If not, what I'd really like to do is start with the issue of the special exception, because if we agree that the special exception applies, that we can approve the special exception, then we can do the variances. But without step 1, the variances aren't necessary. So is there a motion to approve or deny the special exception request? Or does anybody have any comments first on the special exception request? Okay. Jane, I can't hear anything you're saying, and I'm sitting next to you.
I'll move to approve the special exception portion of this request.
We're going to break this down, Sarah. Okay. Is there a second for the motion to approve the special exception request? Is there a second for the motion? I'm going to second the motion for.
He's going to.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to second the motion.
Okay, so both Don and we'll let Jim have this one. So the motion's made by Jane and seconded by Jim. Is there discussion on the motion? Don, do you have discussion on this? None. Anyone have discussion on the special exception motion?
Just general discussion. I think it's a good thing that we talk about use versus form. As we proceed with a lot of redevelopment on this island, I think that issue is going to come up of how do we feel about the use versus how do we feel about the form, and how can good form really enhance some of those uses. So just something to keep in mind. I don't have a problem with the special exception use.
Okay. What I would like to do, Sarah or John, Mr. Herron, just to make this, because a special exception requires the same type of approval as a variance, the same criteria, or has to meet criteria. Should that be read for the record, or should Jane's motion just be indicative that that criteria has been met?
Yeah, so the form of the motion could be as follows: that based upon the information in the staff report and the testimony presented before the LPA, the movement finds that the applicant has met the standards set forth in the comprehensive plan and LDRs for the requested special exception, and
Ditto that.
as reflected in the staff report.
Okay,
You
so,
may add that to my, motion.
so we'll just let Mr. Heron's terminology formalize Jane's motion. Do you agree with that, Jim? Okay. Is there any other discussion on the special exception? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to take a vote just on the special exception. Jane?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
Scott?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Okay, and I agree. So the special exception
And
has been
Don?
passed. And Don?
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. The special exception passes unanimously. Now let's get to the nitty gritty of the variances, because I'm with Patrick here on landscaping. Let's get to the landscaping. Or the variances. So we're going to do these one by one. All right.
What page are we on?
I've just got them written down because I remember reading them, and I've just got them written down. But I suspect Sarah could probably tell you exactly what page. But the first one is on internal landscaping, and this is going to be a little. And you all can say no, Anita, you can't do that. John, I love a visual aid. What I would really like to know, and maybe Sarah, you could tell me instead of bringing in the applicants, because that's not really what we're supposed to do here. If we had the amount of landscaping required by the code, how much more would be here?
So this section of the code requires 10% landscaping area internal to the parking lot, a minimum of 10-foot wide landscaping islands between every 10 parking spaces. It also requires median dividers with trees every 40 feet. But if you just want to get to the basis, like the basics of it, it would be the 10% landscaping area internal. And then you would figure out within that.
What do you estimate is currently in the plan?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Jim?
What do you estimate is currently in the plan?
What was her estimate? If it's 10%.
Oh, if it's 10%, yeah.
What's the?
That's a good question.
What is shown?
I don't have an eye for that, and I would not even give you a guess. I apologize.
Anita, if I could, I don't know how you want to proceed. If you want to look at every variance individually and then vote on them individually, and if that's the way you'd like to proceed, if I could make a comment.
I think that's going to be the easiest way to get through this.
But I think there's a comprehensive approach to this with regards to form and aesthetics and wanting to elevate our game as a town as we redevelop. And I think my comment to the applicant might be, I would be okay if you say, these are the requirements. It may not make sense to put a landscape island every 10 cars. We will look at the amount of landscaping that would be, and we can put it somewhere else and cluster it and still provide something aesthetically. A lot of communities provide these enhancement plans to justify your variance. I could support something like that, and it might behoove them to ask to table this and come back with an enhancement plan. That's what I'm thinking.
That's interesting. Okay. Does anybody else have any comment, John?
Well, a way to address Mr. Vanessa's comment would be to potentially to say we're denying the variance request as submitted. You have to provide the 10%, but we are granting you the variance to the locational requirement. So your point is, assuming the LPA agrees, is we still want the total 10%, but you don't have to do it every 10 car spots. It's, work with staff to locate that in a way that is most efficient for the property owner, but at the same time, making sure that it's aesthetically pleasing.
My only thoughts are that this is the pedestrian-friendly area. This is with a one-stop park area, and we don't want people to get back into their car. I just feel like if ever there was a place to reduce plantings and add parking, this is the location. And I don't know about you, but I don't park to enjoy the landscaping. On the interior side of the parking area, I park to get out of my car. And so as long as there is a buffer surrounding to block out lights, this, that, and the other, I'm not opposed to reducing the interior.
Of the site, but it seems like we're trying to put tons of potatoes in a 5-pound. There is an exception on this site.
Scott, you got a comment?
I also think when looking at the landscaping, you're going to have a beautiful property along the water. And we really want to put more landscaping that's going to block that view. So unless it's, big coconut palms or something, but I think it'd be hard to get that 10%. Do you really want all that landscaping blocking that view?
That in itself is a landscape view for me. I mean, I think.
And my other question is if they use the jasmine, does that count as landscape?
I don't know. Don, do you have, Sarah?
I mean, the jasmine would be considered a landscaping.
But it doesn't meet the perimeter landscaping.
There's no buffer width. There is the required buffer width, and it's not what is required in the.
Of our place, like Patrick just said, I don't want to walk next door. I don't want to walk and have a parking lot to be my experience. And the whole thing about Old San Carlos is the walking experience of going down that boulevard. And so I think that for certain on the San Carlos Boulevard section of this, maybe not so much in the back, but on the San Carlos Boulevard section, landscaping is essential. It's critical. And on 3rd Street, it's critical just for the neighborhood impact. So Doug, you have something?
Yeah, I'm going to comment too. I could not support any reduction in the percentage of landscaping. Where I see a very large asphalt parking lot that's essentially going to become a heat island. It needs a heat island. And it needs trees, and I think
Madam
we need
Chair?
to come up with a better plan.
Madam Chair, if I may make a comment or observation, maybe to assist the board as well as the applicant. I know that a lot of times when you all have variance applications come before you, you have asked, well, what is the actual variance? Are you asking from 15 feet let's setback to 7 feet, and how is that reflected? Show us how that would look. I think that if listening to you, what you all are struggling with possibly is visualizing what these variance requests will actually be translated in. So we don't know that the parking lot, if built to code, would be 20 additional parking spaces versus their request for a variance that will then make it 25. We're not visualizing it, or the landscaping, what would otherwise be a 10% requirement through every 10 spaces, to know we're asking for a reduction from 10% to 5%, and this is how it will look, and this is where it will go, and so I in listening to you all are struggling with that visualization concept, and staff isn't able to tell you what that number is, because they've in the application they've just simply said we want a variance from this section of the code, not necessarily quantified it and then translated that into a visual representation. You may want to ask the applicant to do that and continue the hearing as it relates to the variance request, so you all can see that and understand it. Here's what the variances we're asking for versus what the code requires, so you can compare the two and see what those changes are and what they will look like.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
If I may, just to be real direct and blunt with the applicant, it appears to me that variances are requested to maximize the site. And I do not see the rational nexus as to what the hardship is. I think it would go a long way if you could meet some of these requirements, put some enhancements, and then just show us, maybe you lose a few parking spaces, but you give a better product. Again, not against deviating from the code with variances when they make sense, but I'm having trouble getting there when I don't see the hardship, and we're not even trying to meet a minimum parking requirement for a business here. So if you can help us along that way, I think there's flexibility and there's a willingness to look at options. It's a little hard for me to get there right now.
I agree. You know what? Instead of actually, I think you've got a good point, Patrick, about looking at this, because when we talk about landscaping, we're talking about the perimeter border as well. Are there objections to what they're proposing for the perimeter? So the perimeter normally would have a double layer of shrubs or whatever for how, what's the standard, Sarah? I forget, but it would be substantial, and in comparison to the lovely picket fence with the bright night blooming jasmine.
In this location, the required buffer would be a type D buffer, 15 feet wide with 5 trees per 100 linear feet and a 3-foot tall double staggered row of hedges.
So that would almost eliminate that whole first row of parking.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with a reduction in width. Again, it's about the aesthetics and the parking, and along Old San Carlos, I think it make a lot of sense to provide a pedestrian access there. People like to walk from point A to point B, the easiest route they can go. And people that are going to be going to Old San Carlos would probably like to get there the quickest way possible. So just a little opening. Again, does it affect one parking spot? Possibly, but there could be a way to reconfigure it.
Don, I'm curious what your thoughts on this are.
He's on mute. So
Don?
a second.
I cannot hear. I can hear you, but I cannot hear the crazy noise. I cannot hear.
Okay, I'm going to give you a quick update here. So what we're talking about is whether, Jane, I've got it on mine, whether about the landscaping and really wanting a visualization of what this variance would be, for the perimeter and for the interior, as we look to redevelop Old San Carlos Boulevard and the whole island in general. So do you have any thoughts on that as far as the interior? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the interior, but I am concerned with your comment a few minutes ago of, the walk down San Carlos, the buffer on the San Carlos side. I'm less concerned about the interior.
So what Don is saying is that he is less concerned about the interior, but he is definitely concerned about the perimeter buffer. Okay. All right. So, I count numbers here. That's 4 of us who have this concern. Jane doesn't have the concern. She's got some concern, but not tremendous. But this is a concern, okay, for these.
My thought process being that along the exterior, that I don't necessarily want to see a 10-foot buffer.
No.
At all. What I would prefer to see is something, but I think a canopy of palm trees, which would take up a minimal amount of space in between the fronts of these cars or the backs of these cars where nobody's going to walk because there's not an access out, would be beautiful. I mean, it would present the, McGregor drive down McGregor, how you look at the palm trees, you don't look down at the ground to see if there's shrubs around it. I think that could be easier to get your trees and landscaping in. And I think everybody around it will appreciate and love that. So that would be my way to settle that depth.
So John made a comment to me this morning that this was kind of rushed to us in a way. And so I'm going to go through the rest of these for conversation, but I'd just like a nod or something about the potential for tabling this to move forward. So you all contemplate that as I talk about the rear yard, the rear moving things to the rear element, that variance number 3. Does anybody have any comments on that one? That doesn't seem to be a huge issue. Okay. And what about the interconnectivity? Variance number 4. Well, was that a hot button for anybody? No, it wasn't for me either. And what about the actual parking lot dimensions, which is variance number 6? So going from a standard.
I do have a bit of a concern. I think if we were to look at reducing some of the parking spaces, a lot of places have compact parking requirements. And again, if you look at our trucks and SUVs getting bigger and bigger, I know I've been to a bunch of places where I've got to go out the hatch in the back to park the car. So again, I think a percentage would make sense to me, not necessarily all the parking spaces.
Okay. Doug, did you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I would agree with my colleague here. I think 8 foot is pretty tight, and door dings and all that stuff could be happening, but maybe a percentage or at least some parking spots, standard size.
Okay. Jane?
Agreed.
Jim?
I think, a combination of some compact car parking with other parking spots that meet current code. As pointed out, there are a lot of larger vehicles coming out, and I've been stuck in places where it's hard to get in and out because of the vehicle next to me or behind me.
Okay. Scott, did you have any concern on this?
Not really. I have a hard time tabling it for, maybe one meeting, but tabling it for 3-4 months. That
No. This needs a plan.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
And I think if we were to table, I think it has to go to the next meeting because of advertisement requirements.
I agree. Okay, Don, do you have any comments on the parking lot dimension? The parking space sizes? Did you?
Yeah, just agreeing on what Patrick and I think Doug said, just on the percentage. Yeah, so I don't have an issue with. I don't want to get in the way of progress. I don't have an issue tabling it if it's the next immediate meeting. But if we were presented with a plan.
Okay. Okay. And what about the visibility triangle?
Well, I think the fact that it flows very well straight through and gives a circle around and an in and out that's easy. I think the visibility is simpler and easier than putting in the visibility triangle and trying to make people go more angles.
Okay. Patrick?
I'd like to hear what Sarah has to say about visibility.
Oh, did she have her pen up? I didn't notice.
So actually what Sarah said regarding it was Sarah or Kara, I don't remember which
I
one.
think it was Sarah.
That it would have to be shifted down. That has to do with entrance separation. That's not the visibility triangle. The visibility triangle, you just measure that far. That it's an imaginary triangle. You come back however many feet and you go over however many feet. That space within that triangle has to be open. You don't actually have to move the driveway. You just have to keep that area unimpeded by a visual barrier.
It's line of sight. It's line of
It's-
sight
yeah.
for safe ingress and egress. All sites, all governments have clear sight triangles, so you're not having to creep out into the actual road in order to be able to make a right or left-hand turn, particularly in Fort Myers Beach, where we know how the traffic backs up. So the idea is to have clear sights. Again, you can modify it and change it, but the idea is that those are established for safety purposes.
So my comments related to that, I think there are ways to mitigate for the reduced triangle. So I think, reducing the landscaping height right at the intersection, possibly putting signs up. I don't know if there's going to be a gate there or not for people exiting the parking lot. Obviously, to me, if there's a gate, clearly signals the pedestrians, look where you're going. And same thing with the motorists. So I think there's ways to mitigate for that. So I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Don, do you have any comment on the visibility triangle?
Not specific. No.
Okay.
I mean, I think what I see both points. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So my inclination is to table this for further clarification on this, especially on the landscaping, because it's very important to me. But I'm interested to hear what you all have to say about this. Patrick?
Well, the other option, if they don't want to table this, is they need to go to council.
Well, they have to.
And I think we can make our recommendation that they address our concerns and show up at council with a revised request and plan that addresses our concerns. So it doesn't cause any delays. It gives them clear direction. Also tells council what we're concerned about and what they should be looking for.
Okay.
I concur.
You concur?
Yes, with a caveat. You still have to vote on each one of the items to make it, to forward it with the recommendation. It's not like, well, we decided not to take up the variance request. That is your job.
No.
You do have to vote on them and make a recommendation one way or another. You may say, I'm not trying, we approve
No,
all of
I
them or we
understand.
reject all of them,
No.
subject to, the applicant providing clarification on these issues as voiced by the LPA, and we'll reflect that in the staff report.
So,
Well,
so we could make recommendations of approval conditional upon the direction that we get for each.
You have to vote on each one of the variances.
Mhm.
So variant for internal landscaping, can you approve that variance request with the criteria?
I could make a recommendation of approval, for example, that any landscape islands that are eliminated internal, you have to compensate elsewhere on the site with the same amount of vegetation.
But I don't think you can do that for a variance. A variance has criteria. It's the five questions for the variance for each one of these. I don't think you can answer 1 and 2 yes. I think you have to say 1 and 2. So where's that list?
There it is.
Factors.
Page 230 of your
Page?
packet.
Page 230.
Hang on.
Can you give me page 230, Jane? Do you know what I'm saying, Patrick?
Yeah.
So I think if you said no to 1 and 2, you can quantify why you're saying no to 1 and 2. So they prepare their production for the council so that 1 and 2 don't get disapproved at the council. So this
Chair-
is still
Madam
not
Chair.
it, Jane.
That's 230.
Yeah, I don't want 230.
Can
I want the.
Jason Green, Community Development. Do you mind if I chime in real quick?
I'd love to hear from you, Jason.
Yeah. Hey, how are you?
How are you?
I think what it sounds like Patrick's getting to is a justification of the variance from a specific criteria if you provide it somewhere else. That is, I think that's getting along the lines of something that we would look for. But to your point also is more specifics of what you're looking for, whether it's a reduction to a 3-foot buffer with some hedges consistent with other parking lots. We need more specifics related to each of these variances if you're going to vary from them to what, not just do something better. But to his specific case, I think that one, it's a little bit more, it doesn't need as much specificity, and it's swapping. It's taking one thing and putting it somewhere else, but it's the same amount. That would be suffice for our purposes for them to go design that and show that. But the other ones need a little bit more specifics.
Do you think that we need a motion on each of these variance requests?
I think you need specifics as much as possible to what you're willing to recommend is okay to vary to. So, for example, the width of the landscape buffer along the perimeter, do something better than what you're doing is not specific enough because you have to justify, and I think that's where Patrick was going is he's justifying his vote on the variance of that one because they're going to provide it somewhere else. If you have that kind of conversation with each one, then yeah, we can move forward with each of those. But I think you need to get there with each one. Now, I don't know if you're going to get down to 3.5 foot,
Right.
5 foot buffer, that sort of specifics, but we would like to get as close as possible on some of these.
Anita, I think we can get there on each of those. I just don't know, and I'd like direction from town attorney and also maybe if the attorney for the applicant would like to comment on this we can, I don't know if we can recommend approval with something that's conditional or if we have to recommend denial, but that just put it on the record that we would support it otherwise. And I think I'm happy to hear some feedback from the applicant on that. So I don't want them to be hurt by this, but I think we're limited as to what we can do.
I would recommend the latter, where you say we're recommending denial, but if they were to provide this information and our recommendation would be in support, conditional support, without any prejudice to the applicant, moving forward to the town council.
Do you want to hear from Sarah? Sarah?
It was my understanding that you had the authority to recommend with conditions or deny. So I don't know if you wanted to recommend approval with the conditions that you would place on it.
That's a better way to state it, maybe.
Well, the special exception has already been approved. We've already saying yes to the special exception. So this is just
Right, and
This is. We don't want you to get lost in the details, but we want it to be very clear to the council. I mean, honestly, I don't think number 1 and 2. I don't think the landscaping meets the criteria for those variance requests. I don't, as it currently is. Could it? Yes. Could it? Yes. Thank you, Sarah.
How about we go with the easy ones, get those approved, and then talk about the other ones after.
And would you like to lead the band on this, Patrick? Hey, wait 1 second. Don, any comment?
Yeah. No, I agree though on the 1 and 2.
Okay.
1 and 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Recommendation for approval on the parking lot location variance.
I second. That's number 3?
Number 3.
Number 3? Okay.
I second.
So there's a motion and a second on variance number 3 to approve. Any discussion on that? Patrick? Your vote? Yes. Scott?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Don?
Yes.
Jane? Aye. Jim?
Aye.
And yes, so, okay, so the variance number 3 is approved. Good job.
Recommendation for approval of the visibility triangle with conditions of minimizing landscaping to improve that line of sight, or keeping the landscaping lower. Putting signage at the entrance.
Is there a second for that motion? For the visibility triangle?
I have a second with an addition.
Okay, and Sarah's got her hand up again.
I'm unclear on what you're approving because you did say that they had to remove vegetation and things. So that is essentially requiring it. So are you saying that it needs to be that you're in favor of decreasing that visibility area or?
Okay. A recommendation to approve the requested variance with a condition that landscaping and potential fencing, hardscapes within that visibility triangle be limited to no more than 3.5 feet tall.
Scott?
There's a cabbage palm right at the entrance there that I don't think is on their property, and that needs to go. I mean, the thing's A, ugly, and B, it's blocking the view down the street. So I don't know if that's the town's responsibility, or we codify that, or what. I mean, that'd be my recommendation.
Okay, there's.
With the pedestrian signs.
I'm sorry?
With pedestrian signs.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second to approve variance number 4. No, that's variance number 7. Variance number 7.
Yep.
And is there any discussion on this? Here, Don, Doug?
I actually don't have a good understanding of this visibility triangle, so I'll probably abstain just because I can't make an honest vote because I don't, some sort of graphic would have been helpful for me.
I think staff could probably provide that, or I could jot something down real quick.
I was just going to draw something too.
But I think it'd be great if staff would.
Yeah, that probably would be best. But it's important that you understand this because it's going to come up over and over again.
Trying to remember. Jason Green, Community Development. You're talking about the visibility triangle. I believe the code has, it's either 2 or 3 feet is a max, and then above 8 feet, I believe, is the limit.
But what he's not
So-
understanding is the whole concept of what visibility
It's
triangle
line of
is.
sight. So the code says, and to be frank, Patrick's motion condition is a visibility triangle. So the code allows or requires you to limit the height of fences, signs, shrubs in that visibility triangle. So it's basically, as Sarah described, it's a triangle starting from a certain point on one road back to your driveway or an intersection of 2 roads. All intersections of roads and all intersections of driveways on roads have a visibility triangle. Ours is very, very small compared to other places.
What are the 3 points of this triangle?
So let's just use a side street and a driveway, it'd be basically the edge of the driveway back onto the property. I think it's 5 feet. And then, so the angle goes to Estero, and then you bring that triangle 100 feet, I believe is what it is, or to the intersection of Estero. So whatever ends, a lot of times you end up having visibility triangles overlap each other because you have multiple intersections, you have different lines of sight. So I wish I had a diagram for you.
Is
but,
it in both directions, right and left?
Right.
both directions, and also, so you would have a visibility triangle that diminishes in angle towards Estero from a driveway on a side street, but then you also have a visibility triangle at the intersection of that side street and Estero. So you have times where that triangle is wider or bigger at that point than the end of the triangle coming from the side driveway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I get it.
He's
Yeah,
using a
I understand
sterile
what
Yeah,
you're
instead
but
of
you have, especially on that sterile and then a side street and a driveway on a side street, you've got at least three visibility triangles there. You lay them out, you overlap them, and then the code requires those to be limited vegetation height. I think it's between 2 or 3 and 8 feet, something like that.
Okay. I understand now. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to variance number 7. We have a motion to approve it and a second to approve it. Is there any other discussion? Dawn, you have any discussion on visibility?
No.
Okay, so the motion to approve, Patrick, your vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Is the seconder? Doug?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Dawn votes aye. Jane?
Aye.
And Jim, aye, and I, so visibility triangle is approved. Next one, Patrick. Interconnectivity?
Interconnectivity, motion to recommend approval for the requested variance to not provide interconnection to the adjacent lot because of the current development.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this? Dawn?
No discussion.
Any discussion at all? Patrick, your vote?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Anita? Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Did Don vote?
He did? Okay.
No,
Oh, Don did, I'm sorry.
it's aye, it's yes.
Okay. All right, and next one, parking lot dimensions, number 6.
I think we need discussion on that. I'm inclined to go with a percentage, so, and I guess we can discuss it as a group of maybe no more than 60% or no more than 50% of the lot spaces being compact spaces, something to that effect.
Doug?
Can I ask a question? What is the town standard? Is it 9 feet?
Sarah?
One moment. The town standard requires 90-degree spaces, 8.5 by 18, and the one-way aisles 20 feet and the two-way aisles 22 feet. So it's essentially a half a foot narrower, 2 feet shorter, and the aisles are 2 feet less wide.
Oh,
It says I'm not.
I was kind of forgetting that the
The aisle.
aisles themselves are also reduced. You know, when you start putting all these reductions together, you get a parking lot that's difficult to maneuver. I think there's the way the parking lot is configured behind the building, there's a little less flexibility there. But as soon as we get to the side part where it opens up, there are design solutions in my mind. So I would be less inclined to support all these reductions for the where we don't have that hardship. There's no design hardship that prevents us from meeting those requirements on the side.
Does it matter to you that the parking lot's basically functioning like this now? Does it change your mind at all?
Not that much, because again, I think we need to elevate our game as a town. And unless you can demonstrate a hardship, I would tend to say, let's try to stay as close as we can to our code. And if we need to change a code, we can do that. If we all believe there's a need to change that code.
Would you agree to, a 60% compact and the rest of it standard, or?
Yeah, well, the spaces are one thing, and then they not only reduce the width, they reduce the depth, And they also reduced the width of the drive aisles. So again, it's very hard for me to support. It might be one of those where at least my position is I can't support it without, but could support a redesign where demonstrated effort on the part of the applicant to minimize those variances.
I'm curious to hear from the engineers here on this. Doug?
Yeah, I could not support it as submitted with those changes, both in width, length, and drive aisle. I think it would be very difficult parking lot.
How about you, Don? You feel the same?
Exactly the same. Yep.
Okay. And Jim?
Yeah, I can't support it as it's currently presented. As pointed out earlier, they're creating their own hardship, especially in the larger area. I think they can redesign that and come closer to meeting code.
Okay. How about you, Scott?
I think there's a solution. I don't know if it's a percentage. Maybe moving that one island over, and so that would create more depth in that middle area where the bigger SUVs could park.
Okay, so it sounds to me like this variance will fail, but that there may be remedies sometime between now and the council meeting. I don't know, but is there going to be a motion? Patrick, so you're a motion maker on these. Go ahead.
I motion recommendation for denial of the proposed variance with a, I guess, a caveat that we could support some of the requests or part of the request, especially with compact parking. With a good faith effort in redesigning the parking lot.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion to deny.
So the motion is made by Patrick and seconded by Doug. Is there, Jim, next time your phone goes off, you're going to be dismissed. I'm teasing you, kind of. So we have a motion and a second to deny the request for the variance for variance 6. Is there any further discussion on this? Your vote, Patrick?
Aye.
And Doug?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I agree. So the item number 6 is denied. And that's it.
Pedestrian system. Number
The
5.
number 5 is taken off by the request of the applicant.
Buffer between parking.
Perimeter buffer. Did we do
No.
number 2? Perimeter buffer? I don't think we did.
No, we haven't done one.
We haven't
and
done
two.
1 and 2. We did the difficult ones. Okay.
That's correct.
I mean, we did the easy ones, so they say. All right. So
I-
now let's go back to
I
number
don't
1
have a
and 2.
motion right now. I'd like to hear what people think about that and what they might suggest.
So, Don, you have any comments on this? It's quiet in
Not
here
on
now.
Number 1. Yeah, not. I know it's wonderful. Not on number 1. Number 2, I already made the comments. I would stand with those on,
Okay.
on the buffer.
Okay. Anybody else? Doug, anything?
Just that I can't support a reduction in landscaping. I think you really do need some shade in that parking lot with some islands with actual trees in them for shade.
My thought process is, once again, to stick with a palm tree thing that could be a theme that would carry out down San Carlos, Old San Carlos, and also provide a smaller area that would take up the landscaping so that the parking spaces don't have to be reduced, because it's in an area where nobody's getting in or out or going across. So it would provide, something that's pretty lush and very interesting to look at coming down the street, and yet not take up, a 10-foot area. So I'm saying more trees, less thickness.
Okay. Jim, you have any comments on this?
As I mentioned earlier, I think that the landscaping is needed. Whether or not it needs to go to the 10% that code requires or some amount less, I just think it needs to be more than what's shown.
Scott?
I would concur, but there's got to be, I think they can get there. But I'd like to see some, like Jane said, more palm trees and then have it visualized in presentation, at least for town council.
I agree that there needs to be a visual presentation, a real visual presentation. That like, this is what we're going to plant. I don't have the perimeter buffer is not as important to me as that internal buffer is. The perimeter buffer, I've always thought, quite honestly, that double stacked 15 feet is, everyone always asks for a variance to it. To me, it seems excessive, especially here on Old San Carlos, it seems excessive to me. However, I think landscaping is essential on every project. I think landscaping is essential. And on this one, especially because we don't just want asphalt. And so if I were making the motion, I would make a motion to deny variance 1 and 2 with all the commentary that's been made so that the conversation moves to the council, and I'm getting all the nods from everyone, from DeRay, from John, from Sarah, from, I'm sorry, are you nodding too, Don? I could tell. So, because I don't want to say, I'd like to approve it if you do whatever, because it doesn't meet the variance criteria. And I just think makes a stronger statement of how important it is to us.
But could we state that we
have?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think the council will read all of this and likely watch it.
And I think in the motion, it should state that we would definitely consider a reduced buffer on both of them, but we require a buffer.
Yeah, I think we want to see a planting plan.
We want to see a planting plan. Yeah.
Yes.
Planting plan. Yeah.
Is that a motion, Anita?
No, Doug's making a motion.
I would make a motion to deny variance requests 1 and 2. And that before we were to approve a variance request, we see a planting plan and that we see in landscaping internal to the parking lot.
Before I second that, would you consider?
How about second it
Okay, I'll second
discussion?
for discussion. I would like to see if the motion maker would consider adding that we would allow a reduction in the 15-foot buffer and possibly the 10%.
I would amend it to make a reduction in the buffer because I tend to agree with what you say, but not in the 10%.
Are you sticking with your second, Jane?
I'll stick with it for discussion.
Okay, well, it is on discussion.
Okay.
If you're uncomfortable sticking with that, I'll second it because I agree with Doug.
Okay.
Do you want to remove your second? Or you want to stay with it?
Well, I'm discussing, Anita. My thought process is with the 10%, with the view triangle having to have space open and everything, this is going, it's going to push it to the back. And once again, I think that back is landscaping with the view and everything like that. I think it presents something that most parking lots don't have, a water view.
Scott, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I agree. Madam Chair, my question is if we're all struggling with the perimeter buffering and we like what they presented, why are we denying it?
Because it isn't actually a plan. Here's a pretty picture.
We might do
So
this.
we want them to create an actual plan. We want them to say, here's the plan. And quite honestly, because this does not meet the criteria for the variance request.
I wouldn't be able to support it the way it is.
Okay.
Just asking.
Yeah.
I think there's, I would like to see some landscaping internally. Does it have to be 10%? No. I think it's about form again and aesthetics. You know, show us, here's what code would require, here's what we're proposing and why.
That works.
Okay, but at the heart of this, the motion to deny it is still a motion to deny. 'Cause
Yes, and I would support that motion.
Okay, so all of this will be encompassed in the minutes of the meeting, so they'll understand, and you all certainly understand what the sentiment is, right? Are we getting all the nods? You agree, Don?
I do.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on variances 1 and 2? Any clarification needed for staff?
No, I think I got it.
Okay. I just saw you two talking. I thought, oh, maybe you need some info. All righty. Okay, so the motion maker was, did you?
The motion was to deny.
The motion is to
correct?
deny.
Okay.
Yeah. So Doug, your vote?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Don's vote is aye. Patrick? Jim?
Aye.
And Scott?
Aye.
And me, yes. Okay. So 1 and 2 are denied with all of our conversation. And that wraps up this hearing. I know that was kind of awkward and weird, but it just seemed the best way to eat the elephant. Okay. Ooh, yeah. Do you all want to just go on to, I know that, who's here for item number E, the 1.5 foot, you guys. Okay. So let's go to that real, unless somebody wants to take a break, we'll go on to the next one. Jason, what's the story with lunch?
Priorities.
I warned him.
So now that you told everybody, I'm passing down.
I'll invite whoever'd like to.
I'm passing.